What surprised you the most about moving from the third world to the first world? The toothpaste aisle. There is an aisle for toothpaste. It's been almost 25 years and that still boggles my mind. How well lit everything was. It was like looking at Christmas lights and the first time I smelled Burger King and saw a yellow Mustang. When I first came to Canada, it terrified me that people were so nice, especially when it came to traffic. The first few times it happened, I didn't know what the F was going on. I'd be standing in the little gap between the traffic signal and pavement looking at this car that starts slowing down 20 meters in advance. While I watch it, expecting it to go past so I can cross the road, it just stops. And then the driver makes a little hand motion thingy and I'm standing there thinking, do you want me to go? Do you want me to go first? What is this? Is this protocol? Is this what's done here? You wait for me? I, as a pedestrian, have rights and not just a bullseye on my face? So I spent the first year or so just freezing like a deer in headlights every time I had to cross a road. Because a lifetime of playing traffic frogger in Karachi did not leave me with the impression that drivers knew what the brake was for. And Canadians. You're nice. It's damned terrifying. Honduran here who moved to Germany. Being able to walk in the streets with your phone in your hand was a bizarre feeling. Also how everyone was on time. The passengers on trains have little to no instructions and mayhem somehow doesn't break loose. Being able to find a ride online from a stranger and not be murdered along the way. How everyone respected convention. Once I saw a hat on the floor for about as long as I sat there and nobody picked it up. In Honduras, it had been gone in less than a heartbeat. How they allowed and protected the Third Reich to hold a demonstration. In Honduras, if it wasn't the party in power, they would have been repressed in no time. How I didn't really need a car. I was able to take public transportation with my expensive headphones, book and smartphone in full view. Oh Deutschland, ich vermisse dich so sehr. What surprised my grandmother when she saw Finland was how conservative people were with land usage here. In Nigeria, during imperialism, a lot of land was wasted in grand architecture. I remember going to a university there. From entering the front gate, we had to drive what was at least a half mile before reaching the first building. Otherwise, it was just all grass. Haha, yes, the Nordic countries are quite sparse and compact compared to a lot of places, even other first world countries. But I'd argue there's a lot of beautiful stuff there anyway in the right seasons. You can't beat Helsinki in summer. Air conditioning everywhere. I was amazed at how you can go to libraries and borrow books for free without paying anything. I felt like there had to be some catch, but after asking numerous questions, I complied and got me a library card for borrowing a gazillion books. I was walking around Hong Kong and was astonished to see that someone, presumably on the orders of some local government entity, had put up Christmas lights above the railing on the subway. If they tried that in Manila, it would be gone and sold within hours. I grew up in Kenya as a child, and when I finally returned to the first world, I was surprised how relaxed everyone was about not being mugged. I worked at a hospital in Kenya earlier this year, and the interns there wouldn't let my brother or I go home walking after 7 p.m. because they said it was just too dangerous. We were staying at a church 500 meters down the road that wouldn't take more than 3 minutes to get to. Constantly, people would tell us to watch our valuables, and it became so pessimistic that when we left, we were in that mindset for about a month afterwards. The size of everything. I was picked up from the airport in a Ford Expedition, which was about the size of my house back in Cuba, and then I was taken to a 6-bedroom house. I remember I used to feel uncomfortable in the big rooms, so I would hang out in closets and whatnot at first. On a side note, right before I left, my older brother told me that in the US you could tell the toilets to wipe you, and a hand would come out the back to gently wipe your bum. He went on to specify that I must ask in English, because if I asked in Spanish, the hand would put a finger in my butt. I didn't go number 2 for a week. So I guess another surprise was normal toilets. My mum had to wait in line for bread for 2 hours. 2 hours for frickin' bread. When it was her time to turn in her food stamps, sometimes it'd run out. She comes here and there are aisles of bread, rows and rows. White, whole wheat, multigrain, 12-grain, 18-grain. Flax, ancient grain, hot dog buns, hamburger buns, artisanal breads, sun-dried tomato, garlic bread, cheese buns. Cheese bread? It blew her frickin' mind. My father grew up in Sri Lanka, and if you've been to any South Asian country, you'll know that the roads are deadly and nobody stops for anyone. He said the thing that surprised him the most was when he went to England to study and people stopped at the crossing waiting for the man to turn green. When the man turned green, he said it was like magic that all the cars stopped to let people cross the road. Wait, what? Water is free? And free refills? Huh. When I first moved here from the Philippines, I was surprised just how frickin' clean it was. Holy crap, I felt like I could just eat off every gosh darn surface of the airport, whereas the airport in the Philippines would probably give you herpes if you sat down anywhere. Everything wasn't jam-packed to the frickin' gills and nobody was peeing in the street. My uncle joined the Peace Corps and lived in Tonga, a tiny island in the Pacific, for 2 years. One of his friends from his time there went on a road trip to the US and my uncle met her in LA. Anyhow, they got into a cab at the airport and my uncle said that his friend had this terrible look of anxiety on her face and just kept looking around. Her head was just darting around every which way. He asked if everything was alright and she said she was waiting for the high-speed chases, gunfire, and explosions. My uncle had to explain that those sorts of things typically only happen in movies. For her, the only window into the world outside of Tonga was movies she'd seen. It's interesting how media or the lack thereof can shape someone's perceived reality of the world. In the States, when people say, "How are you?" they're really not asking the question. I cringe whenever I think about all the times I stopped for 5 minutes and talked to the people who asked me that question during my freshman year. How much food gets served and/or thrown away? Also, how much fresh produce costs compared to fast food? I used to work in a bakery. Each night we'd throw out at least 6 to 8 bags of fresh bread and cakes. It's devastating to think about all those people who are in hunger, and there I was throwing out perfectly fine food because of some stupid chain store policy. I think what struck me was how sheltered I was in my third world. I pretty much lived in a first world bubble in the third world. Oh, there are a few things. The roads aren't smooth and clean like glasses and mirrors, the girls are not as promiscuous as portrayed in the MTV videos and movies, and there are beggars, we just call them homeless people. Peaches. Delicious, delicious peaches. The majority of you probably think that I'm joking, and I get that because peaches are taken for granted, but when I wasn't living there, I didn't know peaches even existed. Once I came here though and had some, it was frickin' fantastic. Sometimes it's just the little stupid things that are great. Roads are smoother, there are traffic laws and most people abide by them, there's no concept of a line in third world countries, sadly even in China and the Middle East as well, people bargain more in the third worlds, refrigeration isn't standard in third world, things in fridges and coolers at the market are just lit and blowing lukewarm air. Ice is uncommon, if it is around it came from a block of ice. Customer service exists in the first world. Third world you eat what's being made even if it's bad or made incorrectly. You don't like it? Too bad. Fruits are better in the third world. First world fruits most of the time are picked before being ripe and shipped. Diet soda options are everywhere. Both Pepsi and Coke options are everywhere too. Water in most first world countries is drinkable by tap. Third world, not so much. Depending on where you are, showers and toilets are combined. No flushing toilet paper down the toilet in third world countries. Most streets are clean in the first world. Trash, litter and garbage is everywhere in the third world. People honk in the third world to tell you they're there. In the first world, honks are used mainly for road raging. That final one is interesting because while it's very distressing for people who aren't used to it, it is technically the correct use of the horn, to announce your presence on the road. We have long since lost that purpose in the first world and it's used as an intervehicular FU. Well, mine's more about a relative, not me. I lived in Australia and I have Vietnamese relatives. Once, a cousin who had lived his life in Vietnam came here to visit. When he arrived, he was so confused. "Dean, what's all this grass in front of your house?" "It's our lawn," I replied. "What's that? Were there animals that graze on it?" "We don't have any animals, no." At this point, he was beyond confused. So what do you do with it?" "Well, we just let it grow, and then when it gets too long, we cut it down and throw it away." I can honestly say with no hyperbole that I've never seen someone so confused. Let me tell you a story. For the first few years of my life, I lived in a rainforest in a little leaf hut with my grandmother. No electricity, no running water, no cars. It was literally a rainforest and I had no idea what the outside world was like. My father, who lived in Australia, was deported from my country because my family didn't like him. Then decided that at age 7 I would have to come to Australia for my education. The whole experience was surreal to me. I remember flying on the plane and being confused at how such a heavy thing could fly. Even the lights were amazing to me. Turning them on and off was like magic to my mind. When I landed in Australia, my father asked me if I wanted a drink of water, and my reply was, "Well, it doesn't seem to be a river anywhere nearby, so how are we going to get it?" My dad then showed me a tap, and my mind was blown. Where was the river where this water was coming from? The refrigerator also blew my mind. In the village, if we had meat, we'd eat it immediately otherwise, and here was this magic machine that preserved it. He later asked if I wanted to go to the grocery store to get food for dinner. I replied with, "You don't have to grow your own food?" My dad chuckled and we went to the grocery store. I was amazed. Most of these foods I'd never seen in my life, and there was so much of it. Also, I could eat any meat I wanted. I could keep on going with things that amazed me, but really there were so many. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. People pick up poop after their dog craps on the street. In Russia, there's an expression, "Spring will come and crap will float." That's because during the winter, every time a dog takes a dump on the street, it freezes and gets covered by snow. Now imagine the reverse process as it gets warmer. Now, I was young when I came to the US, but I seriously expected flying cars. I was very disappointed. How confident people are and the way they approach and talk with sweetness, especially women, it blew my mind. Everything just works. Banks have no armed guards, and while you're banking, you have no fear that someone in the bank is spotting to see if you take money out to rob you a block away. You stop at a traffic light at 3 a.m. and you actually wait for it to turn green again. You don't just do a rolling stop and run the light for fear of someone hiding in the bushes nearby jumping at you to take your car. A package is delivered to your front door while you're away. You can be 99% sure it will still be there by the time you make it home. Nobody's going to steal it. You have a problem with a company or a product, you can be reasonably certain that companies will try to make it right and not just laugh when you call to complain. If you call the police, they'll actually come to your house. Same for ambulances and firefighters. You pay taxes, but you have good roads, hospitals, police, infrastructure, like phones, streetlights, and water. The politicians caught stealing are out of public life with no hope of being elected again. In some of them anyway. Streets are generally clean and free of graffiti. If you need the justice system, it works reasonably well. Nobody's going to get away with murder because they have connections to a judge. All of these things are non-existent in the third world. Well, Portugal is a fully developed country, and we've recently elected mayors who served time in prison for having stolen from the same cities that were electing them again. Yep, I think this can also happen easily in Spain, Italy, or Greece. I think a lot of Southern Europe countries still have the mentality of, "He robbed us, but he also did good things," that we see in developing countries. From what my friends have told me, supermarkets. They're amazed by its size and vast food selection. The taste of fruit and vegetables and the sense of community. Maybe this was just because fundamentally my family is quite antisocial, but when we lived in Zimbabwe and Uganda, my brother and I were constantly visiting friends and the friends of our parents. But since I've moved to Canada, I only occasionally see my friends outside of school. Not sure if Vietnam counts as third world, but definitely developing. This was 10 to 12 years ago. I was about 11 or 12 at the time. Holy frick, the highway. We landed in LA, and seeing 12-lane both-direction highway in person was mind-blowing. Cars everywhere. Also, the moving sidewalks at the airports. We had escalators, but moving sidewalks were a first. Glorious AC everywhere. Toilet paper. Yep, I was amazed by the amounts of toilet paper available. There were also channels that aired cartoons 24/7, buffets and Salisbury steaks, and Toys R Us. Oh, I was in heaven. I was a teacher in South Korea and had a friend who was a North Korean escapee. Very nice guy and very bright, but the little things were funny. I remember him just being enamored with the little handheld firecrackers we'd shoot off at the beach. Then there was the time he was beside himself with excitement at a movie he'd just seen. He asked if we'd ever heard of it. The movie was E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Growing up in a Muslim country, I was simply amazed at how easy it was to buy beer and adult magazines in the US. As a 9-year-old coming to Chicago from the Philippines, a lot of things definitely caught me by surprise. Before arriving in America, I thought that everything was supposed to look like The Sims. Boxy houses in the suburbs with clean-cut grass and the most regal people imaginable. Instead, I saw many similarities with the Philippines, especially in the urban areas. The poverty, the beggars, and the hardship that many people faced really caught me off guard. I used to think that the United States was the closest thing to heaven, and while I soon learned that America is certainly better overall, I was nevertheless surprised that many people did struggle in the mighty United States. Yeah, it's important to state that a lot of places in first world countries have vast economic disparity depending on where you live. Depending on where you move, it might not be a utopia land that solves all your problems and hands you a job. Plus, there are often rampant biases about migrants in most places, even my beloved country. Mostly, it comes down to expecting lower standards, then being surprised when standards are higher, and then realizing that your third world view is affecting how you live in the first world. Having lived in a first world country for 10 years now, the difference from when I came here to now is huge. Gone are the old attitudes towards courting, race, and money. You question how you ever thought life in a developing country was normal. You question things openly, not in fear of reprisal. There's an open discourse on political issues. There aren't checkpoints at every intersection. People have an opportunity to be whatever they want. You notice things like trades jobs pay more relative to trades in a developing country. You get to see an economy in motion. You're served by and large by a capable police force in the first world. Bribery is not rampant. Education is more freely accessible. Electricity, running water, more than one national newspaper, a more open internet, access to information, great infrastructure for economic development, a chance to see public transport run efficiently, a ridiculous mixture of races and beliefs, a chance to know more than your limited worldview, and if you can't appreciate moving to a civilized part of the world, then maybe it should just chew you up and spit you out. I am who I am today because I was given a chance to see things from a civilized point of view. I lived in Indonesia for 7 years of my childhood, ages 3 through 10, on the island of Sumatra. From a child's perspective, the biggest change was how rarely kids go outside in first world countries. When kids in Indonesia get bored, they go outside by default. I learned to play soccer with a ball that was pretty much rags, in flip-flops or bare feet, on concrete. It was all we did, play outside. When I got home from school, the first thing I'd do was step outside, and there was always some neighbor friend who was already out there having fun. Then we moved back to the US, and suddenly nobody was outside. The street at my first house in the US had just as many kids as my street in Indonesia did, more even. But if I went outside or rode a bike or kicked a ball around, I could be out there for hours without ever seeing another kid. Because in first world countries, we have so many passive, indoor activities that we can enjoy by ourselves or with only people we invite over, and there's no longer a need to go outside for entertainment. That took a lot of getting used to. Also, pants. Indonesia's on the equator, so I literally never wore pants, just shorts. I even called pants long shorts for a long time. And vacuum cleaners terrified me, because all the floor there is tile to fight the heat, plus it's cheap. Both of those things were just a culture shock, though. They don't have a lot to do with third and first world transitions. Gosh, I could spend days talking about this. Honestly, I think the world would be a much better place if every kid spent a year or two of their formative years in another country, or at least a different region of their country. It's such a big part of who I am in so many ways. How easy it was to gain weight. Huh, same. I knew Americans were fat, but damn. There's no community in the first world. I live in Southern California, so I do hear it's different than other places in America. Growing up, I knew all of my neighbors. People would just walk into my house, show up for a quick bite to eat or coffee just because they were nearby. I currently live in a series of townhouses with most of my neighbors my age, and I know one of their names only because my roommate was hitting on her and freaked her out. Wait, so you're telling me you have so much clean water that you go number 2 in it? Huh. How much you all take everything you have for granted. Like it's just normal for survival to be so easy for you guys. As somebody from the third world, I was really surprised at how cold the nights get in first world Mercury. You never expect that from a planet so close to the sun. I grew up in East Africa. I live in the United States. Everyone is loud, from the little kid to the tall shy nerd, loud and eloquent. It blows my mind every time. Also, 9 out of 10 white people try too hard to avoid awkwardness, such that it comes out counterproductive, and almost everyone is just super awkward. I work in retail, by the way. Can confirm, I'm American, and I've been told by people from other countries that I'm astoundingly loud and awkward. But some parts of the first world are still third world. My mum teaches high school in rural Georgia. The county she teaches in has a 46% literacy rate. Let that sink in. Less than half the people in that county can read. That's not supposed to happen in a first world country. Where I came from, small things made us happy, like playing around on dusty ground with a football made out of plastic bags strewn together into a ball with string, using small rocks as goalposts, or we'd just walk around and talk. No matter how hungry or poor people were, they found joy in something. When I moved to a wealthier country, fellow peers were so moody and full of angst. Hanging out meant sitting together in a room playing Game Boys, this was the 90s, or watching movies, with nary any actual personal interaction. Pizza that you made yourself at home, which was cheaper, is apparently a no-no. If you bring food over, it has to be Domino's or something. Oh, and God forbid you wear the same clothes to school. Ironically, in some schools, this actually makes you more elite. I left the USA at 6 and moved back in at 18. Life was very different living in a small village in the Philippines. We collected rainwater off of our roof into barrels, iodined it, filtered it, and then boiled it so that we could have clean drinking water. We had a solar panel on the roof that charged a truck battery during the day. It gave us enough electricity to run a fluorescent bulb at night. And the biggest surprise? All the bottled water. We have a miracle flowing out of our tap every time we turn the faucet. A freaking miracle, and yet everyone complains and moans about the taste, so they pay to have someone else's tap water in bottles. I don't get it. Water is precious and nobody seems to care. Managers, what secret tests do you put interviewees through without their knowing? I was a manager for Staples for a little bit and did some hiring of computer techs and computer salesmen or office supply people, copy and print people, as well as general cashiers. There was this one woman with 6 felony convictions that I had to interview for legal purposes. She wore ill-fitting clothes and looked like she'd just come from a war-torn area. Rumpled clothes, dirty face, messed up hair. Her resume was terrible as well. I'd asked her about the felony convictions and she told me that she used to do a lot of substances and got caught, also a few DUIs. She pulled a 1-year Narcotics Anonymous and 6-month Alcoholics Anonymous coins and said she just needed someone to give her a chance. She loves working with people and wanted to get her life back on track. I took her around the store and several people asked me where things were, and I saw her watching me. I'd straighten things on the shelf, smile at people, talk to kids, etc., and she started doing the same things after a few minutes. I needed a cashier soon, so I hired her. The next day she came in to do some computer training and she passed with flying colors. I stuck her on the register with another manager and she did great. After 2 months, I promoted her to my customer service lead and our overall customer satisfaction score rose by over 10 points because of this. Reviews came flying in saying things like, "The extremely friendly cashier, great cashier, hilarious, love this store, best cashier ever, left my wallet with over $1,000 in it at the store, and the short, butch cashier chased me down to give it to me. Great lady, great store," and many more. You can't judge a book by its cover, or where it's been, I guess. Last I heard, she was in management training. I left the company for greener pastures about 6 to 8 months after that, and now I don't get to hire anyone, except interns or work and study recipients. I spoke to her on Facebook again, and she said that she was turned down for more than a dozen jobs before I gave her a chance. Walmart, Warehouse Market, Office Depot, Food Pyramid, and little stores like that turned her down without interviewing her. She called every place, and they said that her criminal record made it difficult for them to hire her to work with money. She's about to get her 2-year AA pin next week. That's a great story. I wish every manager out there could read it. My dad once rented a piece of property to a man with a felony conviction. I believe he'd killed someone while drunk driving. My dad said that he'd done his time and everyone deserves a second chance. It turned out that Rusty was the best tenant we'd ever had. He'd regularly do repair and maintenance work on our other properties in exchange for reduced rent. He did a great job, never complained, and when he did owe us rent, it was always on time. If every tenant would have been like Rusty, my dad probably wouldn't have sold everything out of frustration. There you go. Do your due diligence before hiring or allowing people into your lives, of course, but a second chance can be a great gift to give the world. It was a famous urban legend that Henry Ford would try this test on people. Once he decided to hire someone, he'd take them out for a nice dinner. If they put salt on their dinner before tasting it, he wouldn't hire them, or at least he'd think twice about it. My father also had an interesting trick. He worked in purchasing and he'd often meet with multiple vendors to get the best prices or rates or whatever. He'd take a cup and cut the bottom out of it, and then put that cup on top of a fake quote from vendor A, blocking the price. He'd then fill it with BBs and put a lid on it. Then, when vendor B came into his office, he would politely excuse himself and exit the office for one reason or another. If he came back and saw the vendor picking up BBs, he'd ask him to leave immediately. My boss has strange tests. She comes in late for interviews very often, but if she's actually on time and the interviewee is late, they don't get a job. I call this test the hypocrite. That's a real warning bell. Whenever management doesn't have a schedule that allows them to be on time for an interview, it tends to mean that you should be extremely cautious about taking a job there. Of course, one thing is if you arrive and the interview prior to yours carries on for longer than planned. Another thing is if you're on time and you have one interviewer falling sideways into a chair 10 minutes late and unprepared. Makes me do the desperation algebra to calculate how badly I'd need to take a job at that place. Agreed. I drove to a military site for an interview for a position with a contractor company. Close to an hour later of standing in the security area, not even a lobby, and I called the owner and he said he was on his way. In the background, I heard a baby crying. I ended up taking the job as layoffs were coming at my current job, and it ended up being the most disorganized, dysfunctional, irrational, unprofessional place I've ever worked in. Raise negotiations involved the owner claiming they were a non-profit before caving. Even the amount of vacation time I had would fluctuate 50% based off the owner's memory or BAC. Luckily, they were too lazy to actually track how many days off we took. If they bring a pen or pencil, they are cut above most of my applications. I brought a pen applying for jobs with me. Got a call the next day. Fricking pen thieves. I interviewed with a company recently who told me about their process for interviewing sales engineers. They would go about the normal interview, but that evening they would also go all out for drinks and try to pump the recruits full of alcohol. It was meant to be fun, but also a test of whether the person can know their limits and politely decline or hold their own after a lot of drinks. Apparently, drinking is a big part of sales. Getting the other person drunk while seeming to not try to get the other person drunk while not getting drunk yourself is extremely useful for getting a better price or a larger order or contract. I think at my first job out of school, they might have done something similar. We were out for lunch, presumably as a friendly thing, but also as a way to see how a person handles themselves in a mixed, casual, professional, social situation, common for this job. One of the senior guys starts telling a story about getting way too wasted and acting a fool. I think it was a test to see whether I would respond with my own ridiculous story of debauchery, or try to maintain professionalism. I didn't respond with any stories of my own, despite being a new college grad who only had those kind of stories. I used to do interviewing for a job that was basically hacking the internet. At some point in the interview, I'd ask them increasingly advanced questions until they came to something they didn't know. Then I'd explain it to them. If they thought the new thing was really cool, that was a big plus. It showed they were really interested in the job itself, not just the paycheck. When I was applying to work at a chemical plant, my future supervisor gave me a sheet with several short chemistry problems on it. The first two were normal derivation formulas, the rest were just asking for the names and properties of the compounds listed. I was sweating and getting more and more confused until he took the paper back from me, adding the answers. They were all jokes, things like a ring of 6 iron molecules, Ferris wheel. He just said, "This is a really dumb place to work, so you'll have to have a good sense of humor here." One of my favorite jobs ever. This thread is scaring the crap out of me. I'm desperately unemployed and I had 2 big interviews this week that I thought went well. Did you do the secret handshake? And did you point out the tie with the equation on it and solve it? And did you notice the comics on the fridge? And did you make sure you used the salt at the right time? Less importantly, did you know anything about the subject matter? Seriously, some of these interviewers are making me lose my faith in humanity with how wildly dumb their crap is. So, you want to be a network programmer, huh? Well, grab that cord over there and show me how many sailor's knots you know. I used to think I didn't do very well in interviews. After I saw how interviewing processes usually go, I learned that I'm well above the average candidate. If you think you did well, you probably did do well, and if you don't get the job, they might have found someone who really knows their stuff. Half of these techniques don't prove anything. Most of these people are D-bags who think they're being clever. It does seem that way, doesn't it? Who the frick cares if the applicant with 25 years of work experience and an impeccable track record puts extra salt on his fries? I'd always ask folks to use a particular subject line when sending in their resume for a particular job. Nothing crazy, just please send an email with programming position as the subject. It kind of floors me how few people could actually manage to do this. I noticed when they did. I do the same on Craigslist. I put in a code word at the end of the ad to make sure people actually read the specifications and requirements. Usually, they don't. I'm a supervisor and I've done interviews. I don't ask the typical BS questions. I keep it really relaxed, have a conversation, and just get to know the person while talking about the job. That way, I know what they're really like and not putting on an act for the interview. At the other end of the table, I enjoy these interviews the most. Whether I get the job or not, I at least feel like I put my best foot forward and haven't resorted to cheap cliches. I also feel like the person across from me is more intelligent than the regular trained HR monkeys. Toby isn't a monkey. Engineering manager here. I draw a right triangle, label 2 sides 3 and 4, and then ask them for the remaining side. Many engineers fail this or try to trigonometry it out. I do a lot of interviewing for B2B sales positions. The interview guide I'd been given to use is a couple of timed math questions. At first, I thought it was pretty cruel to put two potentially stressful situations together, but it turns out you can learn a lot about someone outside of their skill with numbers. A candidate's response when presented with the math test is a good predictor of how they'd handle the unexpected challenge in front of a client. If a candidate gets a question wrong, I'll ask them what their approach was. Good for determining if they can communicate concepts clearly. And then maybe I'll explain the correct method to see how they'll handle coaching. But I didn't even take Psych 101, so maybe I'm reading way too much into it. Wow, that's horrifying. I can do math just fine, but you put it in the context of a high-pressure situation and my brain just turns off. For example, exams are easy, but standing up in front of a class of people and answering even a basic question and I can't even do 8 times 4. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work in retail and I'm training to be a hiring manager. I was talking to coworkers about this very question earlier this week, and she told me her old boss's strategy. When a hopeful would show up for an interview, the manager would just do a brief introduction, then feign some distraction, apologize, and tell the interviewee to just walk around the sales floor and familiarize themselves while the manager resolves the issue. While the newbie walks around, the manager would have their sales floor's associates casually approach the interviewee as if they were a customer and have a brief conversation. The idea was just that they would end up shooting the crap about the job and their motives for applying. The person tends to be so wound up in preparing to talk to the boss that they often loosen up when they think they're in the confidence of an equal. Sometimes it's a person who gets along well and would make a really great addition to the team. On the other hand, one guy almost immediately admitted to another worker that he only wanted the job to support his growing substance habit. People lie, especially to the interviewer and especially when they need a job. This strategy allowed the manager to avoid a lot of potential liabilities and a lot of wasted interviewing time. Plus, these people would be working directly with the people doing the informal interview with them, not with the boss. It's important for the new guy to get along with the current crew. I also like that the manager put enough trust in his associates to allow them to be a part of the process. Sometimes a second set of eyes makes a difference. I've typically interviewed people for technical positions, which is a piece of cake. First, ask them technical questions about the job, and then ask them specific details about knowledge they claim to have on their resume. Where I work, padding your resume will get you tossed out rather quickly, but not after being lightly chided for putting stuff on your resume that you don't actually know. People with some work experience tend to pad their resume a bit too much. I remember one guy who listed BGP as one protocol he had experience with. I pressed him to explain it to me, and he caved, then admitted that BGP was used in a project he was involved in, but he had nothing to do with it and didn't understand it. That type of crap does not fly with me. If you put it on your resume, you'd better freaking know it, or I'm going to find out and embarrass you. My dad owns a small IT business. He has a homework sheet of 10 or so basic technical questions he asks potential employees to fill out over email before they meet in person for the interview. The questions cover a variety of programs and problems, and it makes it rather easy for him to sort out those who actually know what they're talking about from those who add a lot of padding to their resume. It saved him a lot of time and has helped him find and build a great team of 3 employees who really know their crap and get the job done right. Out of curiosity, what's to stop me from Googling the answers to the questions? He knows this is something people can do, so he really reads into what they're saying. Is there a common theme of how the person looks at problems? And is there a pattern in their methods? If every question has a dramatically different approach to it, it's quite clear they didn't come up with the answers themselves. Like how teachers look at homework. He isn't looking for the answer, he's looking for their methods. Oh gosh, a company that actually reviews people's technical proficiencies rather than making them go through an arbitrary social test irrelevant to the job. Color me impressed. I used to work in a cafe. The work was simple. I asked the applicants to butter me 2 slices of bread and put a slice of cheese on it to make a sandwich. Those who failed to wash their hands first, failed. What was the pass rate? About 30%. I'm in the middle of interviewing senior software engineers right now. What sucks about XXX? Where XXX is the current language they're using. This was generally done in a fairly light-hearted manner after I asked them to briefly describe their background and they mentioned the main technology they're using. It's not a trick or anything, but it's the most important question I ask. What sucks about XXX? Not enough fisting videos. Am I hired? My dad would have a rubber chicken waiting in the interviewee's chair when they came into the room, and he'd watch them, deadpan, to see what they did with it. My apologies, I didn't realize the last applicant was still here. When I have a big stack of resumes, I randomly split them into 2 piles and just throw one of them in the trash. That way I never work with anyone who's unlucky. On a serious note, bring at least 1, preferably 2 copies of your resume. When I ask you why I should hire you, say something honest and tangible. Everyone is a fast learner. Everyone is also a team player, apparently. These are the 2 most worthless comments you can make to me. I'm a retail manager. You could have a great application and resume and 100% on our computer application skills test, but if your email address is anything like love420forever@yahoo.com, your cell phone has a ringatone such as Usher, or you mention boyfriend or girlfriend problems in your interview, I won't be hiring you. At least get a non-substance or party-related resume or application email address. And if you get by and get hired, don't ask for cashier code 420. Seriously. What if my email address is my username and my ringtone is a meowing cat? Username is great. Ringtone, well, you'd probably sound too crafty and overqualified. Why would such a unique person stay in a position at $8.50 an hour and last there? It costs a lot to hire. I'd say the average hourly employee outside of the pharmacy has been there for 5 years and makes around $12.75 an hour. Some make more, been around since 1999, and of course the newer people. Every industry considers those overqualified. It makes sense, sadly. One of the most dangerous kinds of people in an engineering environment is those who won't admit that they don't know how to do something. For this reason, if a candidate couldn't admit at least once during the entire interview that they didn't know an answer, it would raise a huge red flag. With some candidates, I could ask them esoteric question after esoteric question that any reasonable person would see it's okay not to know, and they would hedge and dance around it, or try and guess the answer. My favorite was, what are the first 4 bytes of a file that identifies it as a Java class? There's some funny stuff in this grouping, but a lot of it is just about as useful as checking the potential employee's horoscope. This reminds me of a joke. 3 wannabe MI5 agents are being interviewed. 2 men and a woman. They're given firearms and told to go into a room and shoot whoever's in there. But they're not told that the weapons contain blanks. The first man goes in and sees his girlfriend sitting on a chair in the middle of the room. He immediately breaks down in tears and can't do it. The second man goes in and sees his wife on the chair. After 30 minutes, he pulls the trigger and emerges distraught. He's passed the test, but his wife hates him. The woman goes in and sees her husband on the chair. After 10 minutes, she comes out covered in blood. The interviewer says, "What the frick happened? That weapon was loaded with blanks." "I know," she says angrily. "I had to beat him to death with the chair." I like that the married interviewees are the ones who managed to pass the test. She was told to shoot whoever was in there, not kill him. I'm sure she didn't get the job. Well, she did go above and beyond what was asked, though. She's a go-getter. My boss does the walking test. He does walking interviews and will change his pace to see if people would keep up with him with the change of pace. It's a big thing in hotels. What? Who's going to separate from the person they're interviewing with? Oh crap, I'm suddenly 15 meters in front of the interviewer. I knew I'd screw this up. I'm an editor who sometimes has to hire other editors. The interview is usually just a formality for me. The resume and cover letter tell me almost everything I need to know. Mistakes on the resume? No way you're getting a call. Disorganized or confusing layout? No thanks, I need people whose main goal is to communicate clearly. Applicants move up in the pool if their style choices, such as using the Oxford comma, match my company's, because I figure it will be easier for them to conform to our style guidelines. I'll also look for writing samples on the web. I would assume that for a lot of these personality test type situations, the interviewer is choosing from a pool of people who've already been filtered through their CVs. The interview is a chance to test their critical thinking skills among a few other things. I'm an engineering manager. One of the first things I do for drafting types is have them do a model for something I sketch up. I leave something important off, such as a thread size, part thickness, or maybe hole location, just to see how long it takes them to ask for clarification. People try to be self-reliant to prove themselves, so it makes a lot of people squirm once they figure out they don't have all the information. A good candidate not only finds the missing information quickly, but communicates the issue and seeks out the answer. 4 out of 5 assume an answer, which kills me when I ask the question, "Do you think your print is ready for manufacturing?" Sometimes it really is true that a candidate who has all the answers is someone who never asks the right questions.
If you don't push your chair in at Cracker Barrel after the interview, 9 times out of 10 they won't hire you. Manners matter.
I ask a question of medium difficulty that any competent person would be sure to get right. I then ask them if they're sure about their answer, implying that it's wrong. Tells you a lot about how they react to feedback and how they communicate with the client or boss when they think they're wrong. IT manager here. I always try to make the person perform a task or write code that will directly relate to the actual job. For example, if you're a front-end HTML jockey, you get a screenshot and an hour to build the page in HTML with Notepad. The special part of the test is that there's no way you can finish it in an hour, so it's as much a question of prioritization as it is technical ability. One guy wasted the whole hour trying to make the rollovers work. No offer. The guys who got offers were the ones who got a basic page running, then went back and went after the frills. My old manager kept a stack of comic books, a lot of old-school superheroes and some of the Star Wars graphic novels, on a mini-fridge behind his desk. He'd always offer the interviewee a bottle of water from the fridge, but in order to get it, he'd have to slightly shift the comic books. If they mentioned the nerdiness or coolness of him having them or asked him about them, then they would be much more likely to get hired. Caleb was a pretty cool guy.
So, only people who like comics get hired? I'm pretty much a nerd, but I don't read comics.
No, it was more that you had to not be embarrassed by the fact that there was a grown man behind the desk who happened to not like comic books. I don't like them either, but happened to like video games, Lord of the Rings, etc., and could keep up. He just liked people to be able to approach those kinds of awkward conversation topics. What was the stupidest reason you got woken up for? When I was a teenager, my much younger brother woke me up from a nap saying,
"Mom said don't wake up."
Another job well done.
Did you ever get the, "Guys, be quiet, Mom said to let him sleep longer," right outside your door?
This is why wars happen.
You mean why 8-year-olds are tossed across ponds and skipped like rocks?
Obnoxiously loud buzz and shriek of a National Weather Service warning to my cell phone at 3 a.m. telling me that in about an hour, it was going to be raining in a county 60 miles away. I figured out how to turn off that crap permanently. False positives generated by humans are unacceptable. One time, I got a tornado warning in November. I live near LA.
Did you die?
My daughter always wakes up in the middle of the night, but it's not a quiet wake up. She's 6. She screams at the top of her lungs, "Dad!" "What?" "I can't sleep." "Me neither."
Anytime I fall asleep at my mom's place, my 8-year-old sister will shake me awake and ask what I'm doing.
You guys really know how to sell the whole having kids thing, don't you? My brother looked at his clock, saw a :30 and assumed there was a 7 in front of the colon on Christmas morning. It was 3:30 in the morning. Even on Christmas, that's 4 hours too early.
One Christmas, I tried to get my family up at 1 a.m. Technically, it was the morning.
I remember doing something like this when I was a kid. I saw 12:30 and freaked out thinking it was already noon, totally oblivious to the fact that there was one of those in the middle of the night as well. My parents were pretty teed off. When we were both pretty young, my sister woke up at 4 a.m. on Christmas Day once. I had to force her to go back to bed. From then on, we instituted a "it's not Christmas until 7 a.m. rule in our house. I feel like everyone with siblings has been the victim or perpetrator of this particular problem. Now we await the karma of our kids doing it to us with a sense of dread.
A bazillion years ago, when I was 16, I was hospitalized for infectious mono, and they would wake me up to ask if I needed a sleeping pill.
They would wake you up? You mean they did this regularly?
In my memory, they were doing it every time I fell asleep. Probably it was just at night. Maybe just one specific mean, kid-hating nurse. I don't know. It was a very traumatic experience.
When I was in the hospital before, they had to wake me every couple of hours for different medicines. Later, it was just to see how I was, like a certain quick test or ask me a question. It made it so I couldn't sleep. The wake-ups were very quick though, like 20 seconds. At the very end of some, she would ask if I wanted a sleeping pill as she knew I was tired of being woken up all the time and not sleeping well. I'm not doubting your story, I'm just wondering if I wasn't the type to instantly be alert when I wake up, if I'd be thinking they were waking me up to ask me if I wanted a sleeping pill. I was in hospital for a week last year. They were giving me Valium at night to help me sleep, but they would give me that at 10 and my IV bag would be changed at midnight. One nurse was the chattiest frickin' B-word in the ward. Comes in and all the lights are off, with me clearly asleep. "Oh, hello, how are you? Blah 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 blah." She was terrible. And then they would wake everyone up at 6 because that's when daily cleaning, changing sheets, wiping things down, mopping floors, would happen. Plus I'd get my daily blood work taken at the time and an anticoagulant shot in the hip. Didn't need it, it was regular practice to give them to everyone. God, they really just don't like letting people sleep in the hospital. My grandma calling to ask me if I wanted blueberry muffins at 1 a.m. Of course I do!
Were they delicious?
Frick, yes. What time are you going to wake up today? Well, I guess right now o'clock.
My husband does this regularly. That or, what time do you want me to get you up? Ugh, butthead. He's so lucky I love him.
Some butthole at university pulling the fire alarm in the dorm building during finals this week. Did they ever find out who did it? Not that I ever heard. My guess is someone got drunk and thought it would be funny. The thing is, at my university, when someone pulls one fire alarm, all the dormitories get evacuated.
Normally, someone drunk just put a pizza in the oven and passed out.
In my halls of residence, any 3 a.m. fire alarm was usually a cheese toastie in distress. I was in the party res, and this happened multiple times at my university too. Once I'd gotten pretty drunk that night and had just gone to sleep, 4 a.m., when 10 minutes later the alarm went off. Despite being the loudest, most annoying alarm I've ever heard, it took me at least a solid minute and a half in my drunken, half-asleep stupor state to figure out it was the fire alarm. I just wondered why my head was suddenly so loud. Staying in dorms wasn't even an option. There was something like a $500 fine if they found anyone who didn't evacuate. I kid you not with this story. So my linear algebra professor decided to test us to see if we were truly learning the material in class. So he said, your cell numbers are in the school system, so I'm going to call each and every one of you at a random time during the quarter. I'm going to ask linear algebra questions and you have to answer it, or else you lose 5 points. I thought it was weird, but we decided to go along with it. 3/4 of the way through the quarter, I completely forgot about it, and at like 3 in the morning, my phone goes off. I wake up and I answered it. Hey, it's your math professor here. Here's your question. How many vectors does it take to form a basis in R4? And what are the conditions needed to form it? I paused for a second and just said, no, I'm not doing this, and hung up. The next day I talked to him after class and he said, if you truly knew the material, you'd know it in your sleep. I lost 5 points, but I didn't care. That was the dumbest thing to do to wake a person up.
I don't know my own name when I wake up from a deep sleep, much less linear frickin' algebra.
You should have called him every half hour from 2 a.m. through a Saturday night to ask him to tell you about something from the class.
I would have gone to the head of the department over this. This is beyond inappropriate. I know that sounds harsh, but this was a power trip, and it was an abuse of his power.
My dad called me and woke me up the other day to ask me if I wanted to go for breakfast. My instinctive response was, frick you, I'll kill you. I called him back 10 minutes later when my alarm went off and we had IHOP. Being woken up to be told I'm going out. I would have gathered that by waking up and noticing that you weren't home. I would assume, oh, she went out.
This happens to me all the time. I get woken up by someone yelling, bye Alexandra, I'm going to the dentist or mall or work. Like, thanks, if only I could have figured that out all by myself. Sorry, I'm bitter about this.
They do mean well. They don't want us to worry. But yeah, we'd rather sleep longer and worry a bit than not sleep and not worry. Is leaving a note an impossibility? A friend of mine showed up at my apartment at 9 a.m. because he was in the neighborhood and had to take a crap. Well, would you rather he left it on your doorstep with a note?
Dear friend, fix your doorbell. This is what you are sleeping in past 9. A lazy piece of crap. If any of my buddies pulled this on me, I'd totally understand.
Coworker called me at 1:30 a.m. to call out for the following day. Coworker, not employee, and because of a sore throat.
That crap happened to me too. Hey, I'm gonna be out tomorrow. Can you tell the boss? Can't you call her in the morning? No, I'm gonna be busy. It's literally just, hey, I won't be there. Okay, have a good day.
Seriously, or send a text, that makes the most sense. I got a lot of places say that's a no-no, but I can't imagine calling that early in the morning is any better. Or if you work in hospitality, you send the text and they ask you to come in anyway, cold or no cold, COVID or whatever. I really don't miss it. My dad, I think he'd been smoking green herb, but anywho, he woke me at 3 a.m. in my senior year of high school to see if I wanted to drive him to Walmart so that he could buy tan mini blinds for the dining room. He handed me a piece of paper that he had supposedly written down the measurements of the windows on, but it was just the wrapper from a piece of candy. Measurements. List of candy. You think he had been toking? You have some pretty high standards of evidence. Well, my dad can be pretty eccentric, and around that time he'd had surgery, but I just don't think the pills they gave him were that good. In case they were that good, do you know what the pills were called? No reason. My mum woke me at 7 a.m. on Sunday when I was 15 to tell me that Princess Diana had died. I was annoyed, so I just said, "Good," and went back to sleep. I was 18, and my mum woke me up at 7 a.m. to tell me that too. I asked if Dodie was with her and apparently nodded in approval when this was confirmed and rolled over. "I've just heard that Princess Diana and her lover were killed this morning." "Mum, I swear it wasn't me. I've been here all morning. I have an alibi." Back in 2007, my dad woke me to tell me Jessica Simpson was getting a divorce. I have no idea why. I've never expressed even the slightest interest in Jessica Simpson. I barely knew who she was. I have no idea how he knew who she was, and yet he felt the need to inform me about the demise of her marriage at 7 in the morning. It was surreal.
Your dad was just really happy that his fantasy was finally coming true. When my dad would wake me at 7 on the weekend to ask me when I planned on getting up.
That was probably just his way of saying get up. Oh my gosh, what is up with parents in this? My dad would tell me that I'm wasting the morning. What the frick? All my family does in the morning is watch TV and yell at each other. I'd rather be asleep. My friend calls me.
"Hey, Jerry, can I borrow Smash Bros. Melee? I'd be grateful, man."
Dude, it's 3:30 in the morning. Fricking wait until the sun is out. Jerry took my words seriously.
"Hey, the sun is out. Can I get the game now?"
Sure.
"Sorry everyone, tournament is delayed until sunrise because someone is being a jerk."
Well, mate, you should have your own copy of the game if you're going to host a tournament, Steve.
Get stuffed, Jerry.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My girlfriend punched me in the face. According to her, she just woke up from a dream, but was still in one of those weird half-conscious, half-dreaming states where she didn't really know where she was or what was going on. She said she looked beside her in bed and saw some dark mass laying there that made her uncomfortable. So after watching it for a moment, she attacked it. Ended up decking me square in the nose. Hard. Somehow, I instantly knew what had happened. I shot up and yelled, "Babe, what the frick?" She mumbled some sort of half-asleep apology, immediately rolled over and went back to sleep. I, on the other hand, lay there unable to go back to sleep for 2 more hours, because it's not exactly easy to do when you're woken up like that. I was furious. It's one of my favorite stories about her and us now, though.
Well, at least now you know she can handle it if any strange dark mass of a person is in your home unwanted.
My dad's, "Wake up, we won $1 million! April Fool's prank 2 years in a row. He really thought he was clever." I can't remember if I was actually woken up or woke up on my own, but I woke up one morning to my ex mad at me because she had a dream that I cheated on her. My dad left for work with soup boiling on the stove. I woke up smelling smoke and I thought someone was smoking. The window was open. I went into the kitchen and freaked out. Being woken up to ask me if I wanted to smoke a bowl.
No, bro, the reason I fell asleep in the first place was because I'm too high.
I woke up punching myself in the face repeatedly. I must have tried to itch my nose or something and did it. Then I hit myself again trying to block whatever was hitting me. I must have hit myself in the face 10 times before I woke up enough to realize what was happening. My whole arm fell asleep and it was dark. Roundhouse kick to the face from my 2-year-old son. Did you repay the favor of the following night? With twice the fury. Roundhouse kick 2. Twice the fury. A couple of nights ago, my husband flipped the light on in the middle of the night because he was looking for spiders hanging from the ceiling while he was dreaming. Twice. 2 hours apart. Thinking about it, it parallels with the time he was sleep-talking, stood up in the middle of the bed and then rolled me over to look under me for the map that he was dreaming was missing. I speak Spanish, but the rest of my family doesn't. One Saturday morning, my dad was having a garage sale and woke me up at 7 a.m. to translate for some guy who didn't speak English and wanted to negotiate prices. So I dragged myself out of bed. I'd had a really late night the night before and was a little hungover and went to talk to this guy about a punching bag. I was talking with him for about 5 minutes before I realized he was speaking Portuguese and that I was having a one-sided conversation with myself and neither of us could actually understand the other. In conclusion, Dad woke me up to translate for Spanish speaker at a garage sale. The guy was speaking Portuguese. My roommate and her boyfriend snuck in at 6 a.m. and tried to quietly do the deed while I was sleeping in the other bed 2 feet away. Wow, F that guy. If he's cool with that.
Just gonna note, no one said anyone had a problem with it, just that it was a stupid reason to wake up.
I woke myself up because I was laughing. I was dreaming about flatulent jokes. I got woken up by my own laughing once too. I remember I was camping and I was dreaming about exploding outhouses, and for some reason it got me in my giggle bone. It still makes me chuckle a bit.
Family members have woken themselves up snoring loudly. My parents' dog tooted itself awake a few times.
And the narrator has also woken himself up with his own toots and snores on a large number of occasions, so let's go easy on the dog shaming. A tiny earthquake, and then when I was about to fall back asleep, my brother came into the room freaking out.
I woke up from a minor earthquake once. We don't really get earthquakes here, so I assumed it was a dream until I saw it on the news the next day.
My mum very excitedly woke up to show me a recently dead bird that she had seen fly into our window. I told her that she wasn't a cat, and behavior such as this was unacceptable. During college, some drunk idiot tried and failed to cook grilled cheese at 2:30 in the morning, set off the fire alarm for an 8-floor dorm. The campus police officer who showed up to help clear the scene stood on top of his cruiser and yelled, "Who the frick burns grilled cheese at 2 a.m.?
My mom wants me to be awake. She doesn't have anything to do, she just doesn't want me sleeping if the sun is out.
Most fun thing for teenagers happen around midnight. Wake her up then so she doesn't miss out on that. I got this crap when I was living at home during the summer between years of college and working afternoon and evening shifts in retail. I'd wake up at about 11:30 a.m., shower, eat, go to work, come home, have dinner, and then stay up until 2 because that's when all of my friends were online. My parents really did not like me sleeping so late. Their reasoning was that I needed to be up at the same time as the rest of the world. I guess it's somehow disrespectful to sleep late if no one else is, but what the heck would I be doing in the morning if I don't work until 1 p.m.? I finally just said it was unreasonable to expect me to be up at 7 a.m. when my schedule was the way it was, and that if my shift changed, I would change my schedule. But yeah, there was like a week every summer of, "Stop sleeping so late, other people are already up." Yes, it's exactly like that, except not always related to work schedule. Still, my mom doesn't want me to sleep the day away, and she doesn't like me being awake while everyone else sleeps. It's not as if I'm loud or doing anything dangerous. My manager once called me at 6 a.m. to ask if I saw his email he sent about an hour before about shirt sizes for the new uniforms. My boss does that. In the call, he's always slightly disparaging that I didn't email confirm I got his email. I'm always like, "You sent it, I got it. There wasn't a question. When there is something to respond to, I'll do it when I get to them." Now I just click reply on his emails and peg out "OK" on the keyboard and hit send. I woke my sister up for moral support when I went to battle with giant-ass spiders downstairs. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that spiders are an acceptable reason to wake someone up. My roommate, who I love so much, put an old potato in the microwave for 5 minutes. We don't know if it's because she didn't poke it with holes, or if it's because it was old, or if 5 minutes is too long for a raw potato, but we had a food flare-up. I wake up because the fire alarm is going off, and I peek my head out and there's a small fire in the microwave. I blasted it with water from a spray bottle until it stopped glowing, and we threw out the melted plate and blew the smoke out of the windows, and we laughed about it for like an hour. It was such a stupid situation. Who lights a fire in a microwave? Who messes up baking a potato? Who's baking potatoes after midnight anyway? Why was it so funny to hold a melted plate in the middle of the night? It's actually one of my favorite college memories so far. My significant other waking me up in a panic because there was a parrot giving birth on the floor. He was talking in his sleep, by the way. Someone waking me up to tell the person next to me the time.
My friends stopped by to ask me if I was asleep.
It's actually really annoying when someone shakes you and wakes you up and then looks you in the eye and asks if you're awake.
It's even more annoying when they ask, "Were you asleep?"
Yes, it's like someone seeing you struggle to carry a heavy load and asking you, "Is it heavy?" I was having a nap one day. I very rarely nap, and a friend of mine who lives halfway across town charges into my room and screams,
"Do you have a phone book?"
I was so dazed and confused that I didn't even consider asking why and just gave him the book. Years later, at his wedding, I gave him a phone book of my new town. I will never forget the nap that got away.
I have questions. 1. Why, if he lives halfway across town, did he charge into your room? 2. Why did he need a phone book? 3. People still use phone books?
I'm a pretty heavy sleeper, especially after a night of drinking. One Saturday morning when I was in college, I slept through a fire alarm. I woke up when a security officer entered my room and started yelling at me. "Hey, why are you still here? Didn't you hear the alarm?" I was still in my bed at that point, and I just looked at him and said, "I didn't hear it, I was sleeping." He then tells me that the fire alarm was set off in my room and started rattling off questions. "Were you smoking, microwaving, toasting, lighting incense?" I told him, "No, dude, I just told you I was sleeping, you literally woke me up." At this point, I could tell he was getting a bit frustrated, but so was I. He then tells me, "Get up, you need to go outside with the others." I responded, "Well, can I at least get dressed? I'm not wearing boxers." After that, he finally left, and I put on some underwear and my robe and went outside. It turned out my smoke alarm was defective, which is why it set off the system and why I couldn't hear it as loudly as everyone else. It wasn't necessarily a stupid reason to wake me up, but at the time I was super annoyed because it sucked to wake up to a security guard yelling at you early in the morning. My girlfriend woke me up to tell me the toilet was clogged and asked if I could help. Walked to the bathroom, watched her use the plunger to unclog the toilet, and walked back into bed as she said thank you for the help. Long-serving EMT. Been woken up on a shift at Lord knows what hours for toe pain for 4 weeks, gangbanger with the flu, the patient who wanted to ask if she could take aspirin, picked the same guy up for the 4th time in 24 hours for no reason, people who had nightmares. The list is endless. All young, otherwise healthy people with nothing emergent or immediate happening to them. It's my job. I was on shift, so I shouldn't really care. But when you work 24, 36, and 48-hour shifts, those 10-minute naps are a blessing. 1 hour's a full night's sleep, and anything over that a miracle. I was once woken at 3 a.m. to repair a barn door in the freezing cold because horses are bastards. Human resources. What's the pettiest, what the hell, complaint that you've had to deal with? I was doing temp work at a heating, AC, and plumbing company, answering the phones and stuff, but there was this one girl that just hated me. I guess I was too happy to be employed? Anyway, I go in one day and the owner pulls me into the office. I have to get a substance test done because I'm too energetic and I blow my nose frequently. I'm a morning person and I have allergies. The results come back negative, the owner apologizes, and I quit on the spot. That's right, Toby Flendersons of the world, we're reading your stories today. I for one cannot wait to see the depths of petty crappiness displayed by bored, unsatisfied office workers.
He doesn't say good morning to me. My boyfriend's boss pulled that on him the other day. Why don't you say hello and ask me how I am? It was like, really?
My gosh, I've got a similar complaint in the military once. I was in Iraq, stationed on a base where we, the army, worked with the Marines. I was guarding one of our top-secret facilities and had been on duty an hour or two. Suddenly, this random Marine came up to me, irate. "You're so rude," he said to me. "I've passed by you at least 3 times and you haven't said hello to me once." At the time, I was flabbergasted by this complete stranger being mad at me for not doing something I in no way considered part of my job. I didn't know how to respond. I wish I'd had the wits to point out that I was a soldier on guard duty, not a frickin' hostess at Applebee's. I don't know if it was a cultural thing, maybe he was from the South, or a gender thing because I'm a female and therefore expected to be sweet or something, but I just couldn't understand why a fellow service member would expect someone on duty to be issuing friendly greetings at passers-by. I mean, I've done the hostess thing and I'm pretty good at being friendly when it's appropriate, but when my orders are use deadly force if necessary to protect this room, and to not make our customers feel at home, I just don't expect people to complain about me not saying hello every time they walk past me. This was 12 years ago. I'm still mad. Now, some of you have written to me to point out that in Marine culture, the greeting of the day is actually a real thing. I honestly never realized that. I just told this story to my husband, who was also in the army and did 2 tours in Iraq. His first reaction to my story was, "What the frick was that guy's problem?" But after I mentioned the greeting of the day that y'all told me about, he said, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." Like me, he never experienced that after basic training. He was in a very different kind of unit than I was too. So I think this was just an Army or Marines culture clash thing. I'm grateful to those who kindly informed me of this. Okay, this is weird, but I have to say that I did experience one manager who I legitimately made this complaint about. He would walk in every morning and go straight to the girls working in the handwork area and be super friendly. Bring them coffee, lots of cheerful greetings, then walk to my station. I'd say good morning and he'd grunt and walk on by. Never a friendly word to me, but constant friendliness to the girls. I was fully competent in my job, by the way, still am. After a few months of this, I was called into a meeting with his boss for a regular interview, and he asked me why I wasn't seeming happy with the manager. I told him. Next day, the manager comes to me and we had a long talk in his office, during which he told me he realized, only after being asked about it by his boss, that he was totally treating me like crap every morning. He apologized, stopped fraternizing with the girls, and has treated me fine ever since. So sometimes, rarely, this is a bit of a big deal. I'd say the issue you experienced wasn't just so-and-so doesn't say hello to me. It was so-and-so treats me notably different and worse than my colleagues performing an identical job function, and the difference in treatment appears to be based on gender. The former is a BS complaint. The latter is quite significant. This was about 10 years ago. A guy in accounts pretended his wife had died. He faked her funeral, took compassionate leave, quite a lot of extra leave, as his wife was Indian and he claimed he had to go to India to sort out her estate. He was given £500 from an office collection. Unfortunately, he hadn't let his wife in on the scam, and she had phoned the office looking for him one afternoon. I believe the complaint that came in from his supervisor was, X's wife has died. Well, I just had a phone call from the afterlife. He was fired on the spot, sued for his extra leave, and is the reason we ask grieving workers for death certificates before we allow any extra paid time off. Oh no, sorry, I meant my other wife. I mean, saying your grandmother died is one thing, but what was his plan? You can only fake your wife's death for so long. Oh, we had a guy like that. Never could prove that this stuff didn't happen, but apparently his wife, girlfriend, it changed from day to day, his 18-year-old son and his dad all had a stroke in the same month. Then his mum died, then he leaves one morning saying his dad is back in hospital. He shows back to work around 1 saying, "Yeah, I just had to pull the plug on my dad. Not an easy thing to do," but seemed totally unfazed otherwise. We were able to prove that he was going out to his car several times a day to drink, but I feel like having 3 family members all have strokes, and 2 of them not being of stroke-having age, and then having both of your parents die all within 2 months is a little suspicious, especially when you can just casually pull the plug on your dad. Also, we weren't able to find any records of obituaries or death certificates anywhere. And the funeral home he said they were having the funerals at didn't list anyone that could be his parents as having funerals the 2 dates he took off work. So either he was a bald-faced liar, or he was the most unlucky man in the world for a short period. I'm as amazed by the gall of these particular people as I am disgusted by the behavior, to be honest. I used to help my HR team in organizing a summer event for families. Nothing special, just a grill party for employees with some extra events for children. This was a large company of around 300 employees. A week before the event, one guy raised ape crap hell because we chose a date when his daughter was on summer camp. You should have told him that was exactly why you chose the date.
Summer camp sounds more fun anyways, honestly.
Some people are so entitled. One woman in the US sued a school because her daughter had something else she wanted to do on prom night. So unbelievably, they sued the school to change the prom night. Because frick everyone else, the only thing that matters or has a life is me and my family. My company has had some serious what the frick moments. Take down the pictures of World War II airplanes because our German customers might take offense. Had a phantom crapper who wrote "F you" on the wall in feces and laid one in a newly installed toilet. It wasn't even plumbed in yet, they just crapped in a waterless toilet and left it for someone else to sort out. We had a guy who got caught sleeping at work for the 3rd time. When the shift leader gave him a talking to, the guy complained to HR that he was being victimized. During the subsequent investigation, it was found via CCTV that the worker was going to his car and doing smack. This was confirmed in a positive substance test. These are just some of the ones that jump out at me. Not what you would expect in a multi-billion-dollar aerospace engineering company. A letter of complaint. The doctor called me fat. I looked up the patient weight. Patient was unambiguously fat. BMI of 50+. The doctor was giving results of positive tests for non-alcohol-related fatty liver disease and corresponding dietary advice. Wrote the patient a non-apology letter, gently hinting that choice of words was not ideal, but perhaps some of the doctor's advice was good.
Dear patient, the doctor misspoke. He meant to say morbidly obese.
The doctor misspoke. He meant to say, "There she blows. Man the harpoons." I'm picturing Dr. House apologizing this way. My mum, who works for the state, had to deal with an employee who was catching pigeons at work property and then taking them home to barbecue them. I have a huge list. A manager who complained that a guy's accent was too thick. After speaking with the manager, who frequently uses politically incorrect slang, and the heavily accented gentleman, I can honestly say the manager was the issue and that guy didn't even have a very thick accent. A guy kissing his girlfriend hello after finishing work. This was reported as a homophobic act. A guy who kept asking people if they were on break at the same time, as he likes to pray with them. Frequently. A woman calling herself the B-word and another employee reporting her for insulting an employee. Yes, the actual complaint stated that she called herself the B-word. A girl complaining that another guy was stalking her every night. She would ask a guy to escort her to her car. It was the same guy. That one was weird. She actually used his parking space at his house to save money since he lived close to work. She then later complained that he stopped letting her do this. I can only assume due to the stalking complaint. A manager reporting every single one of his employees in his branch for coming in late. Turned out he had told them to come to work an hour early, unpaid, but they came in 15 to 30 minutes early instead, unpaid, so he tried to write them all up. A male customer called his boyfriend so gay. When the employee told him not to be homophobic, he replied they're gay and lovers. She then asked for them to kiss to prove it. That one had a ton of people in stitches over how this woman literally lives a Futurama skit life. Might not be Futurama, but I swear I've seen a show where two people pretend to be gay and do a super awkward kiss. What size of company do you have to run for these things to happen with this frequency? Or is real life actually like The Office TV show? Also, I think the cartoon that last person was thinking of was Family Guy. One of my favorites from the other half who is in HR. So Mr. Blue and Miss Pink work together for some time. At some point, their inter-office flirting becomes too much for Miss Pink, and she goes to HR. Apparently, Mr. Blue has been sending her texts and making overtures that the married Miss Pink does not want and needs to stop. Mr. Blue is pulled into HR and they go over his behavior. He's going to be suspended while they determine if he'll be terminated. It's correctly pointed out that this is very inappropriate behavior. He seems to understand, but something is off with him. Then he asks, "Is she saying she didn't want me to do this?" "Yes," comes the answer. "This isn't something that coworkers do. You're single and don't understand the full scope of what's going on." Hold on a sec. Mr. Blue pulls out his phone and shows a text of Miss Pink with her, undressed, spread eagle along with a steamy note. Then another and another. "I'll send them to you for your research." HR regroups, ends the meeting and does more investigation. Turns out they'd been doing the deed for months. The husband was getting suspicious and she needed an out. They both got disciplined by HR, though her marriage fell apart and she had to carry the knowledge with her that most of HR had seen her naughty bits. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The most what the heck complaint I've seen is finger guns being banned in a workplace. Someone complained that they felt threatened by someone making finger guns in the air and filed a complaint. And I guess since that was creating a hostile work environment for that employee, they had to send a memo that it was unacceptable behavior. I guess it's all how you imagine it. Most people make them all friendly and nice, but maybe you're alone in the office and Mike, who's made it clear he really doesn't like you, walks in, stands in front of you, glowers and stares you in the eye, slowly raises his double-barreled finger gun, levels it at your face, pulls the imaginary trigger, turns away, and quietly goes about his business without ever saying a thing. Is that HR worthy? In my humble opinion, I think you need to wink if you do the finger guns, otherwise it is hostile. Not HR, but a friend who owned his own company told me about having to fire a guy for picking up a working girl in the marked company vehicle. It amazes me that people seem to forget they're representing the company when driving a company car. Whenever I drive one, I'm the most cautious, courteous driver on the road. Always following speed limits, letting people merge when they want, not cutting people off, no phone while driving, but I feel like I'm constantly seeing others in a company car that are some of the most aggressive and horrible drivers doing the exact opposite of me. It's just kind of like, why would I ever want to buy something from your company when you act like that? They don't work for Bang Bus then. I know the people in HR pretty well. My work used to let people dress up for Halloween each year. Company is about 350 people in size. People used to have a blast. There would be parties and contests for costumes and pumpkin carving, etc. I would guess about 65 to 70% of the building would get really into it every year. One lady complained to HR that some of the costumes were upsetting to her because they were satanic. We're talking vampires here, folks. Fricking Dracula. Like the classic teeth, black cape, white skin template vampire we all know. That was the end of Halloween for the entire building. I hate that B word. I would distribute pentagram necklaces and encourage people to join me in worshipping the Dark One, just to get her back for that nonsense. If someone can show me where vampires appear in the Bible and personally attack the various protagonists, maybe I'd say they have a fringe case, but even then, who cares? Silly, bored Bible Karens. The new recruitment manager was sending inappropriate and very explicit text messages to female job seekers. You know what? He didn't last very long. He didn't last long in what sense? In my office, there was a huge deal of who kept finishing the pot of coffee without starting a new one. Let me tell you, some office workers had to go 4 or 5 minutes without coffee, which caused chaos.
I'm thinking it was you.
I've done a lot of bad things in my life, but I would never leave a coffee pot empty. Did you do those bad things because some F-word left the coffee pot empty? Chewing too loud, typing too loud, had to go home because it's cold, hottest month on record and the AC in the server room next room over is dying, and they can hear him. Direct quote. Apparently, he was laughing from across the building, not loudly, and they were not okay with it. I once lightly tossed the keys to a fellow employee. It's something I often do, but this particular employee didn't like me. Later on, I was asked by my manager why I threw the keys at my coworker. Apparently, my coworker told them that I got angry and huffed and chucked the keys at his chest. I was utterly flabbergasted that I was considered to be the one in the wrong. When asked the standard, "What should you do next time to make sure this didn't happen again?" I didn't know what to answer. I considered answering that maybe my coworker shouldn't be such a wussy B-word. Luckily, my team leader stepped in and told me the right answer was not to toss the keys next time. After the meeting, I busted up laughing. It became something of a running joke with my other coworkers whenever we tossed the keys to each other.
Next time, make a point by slowly placing the keys on the floor and backing away slowly. You might get another complaint, but that would be funny.
We had an issue with scented things in our office. Some people had a sensitivity and there was little airflow, so if someone sprayed something, they had issues. But that's not the bad part. It ended up being a feud between two sections that had to be mediated by HR. On the sensitive side, there was a supervisor who looked for reasons to write up those who might be wearing something scented. She tried to write up someone for wearing a scented deodorant and someone else for carrying scented lotion in their purse. That person hadn't even opened it, by the way. It didn't help that the sensitive one liked to claim a migraine and go home if she even suspected someone was wearing a scent. They ended up stopping the whole issue by setting a trap and monitoring the scent of some new lotion. They all talked about how good it smelled. Strangely, the sensitive one got a migraine and the entire group was called into the office to be written up because even the supervisor could smell the non-existent lotion in her office. When called out on it, HR had to come in and put a stop to the whole issue. I understand that people have sensitivity to smells. I'm one of them. Old lady perfume makes me have an asthma attack, and the beginning of it was reasonable. People followed the rules. But this turned into a witch hunt on one side with someone taking advantage of it. At one point, the supervisor demanded to search people's purses and bags to make sure they weren't bringing in scented items. Didn't even have to be using them. HR did have to tell her that it was illegal, though. It's funny how tribal people can become in the workplace over a prolonged period of time. Boredom and perceived injustices can combine to mutate into some truly absurd fights. HR worker here. There's always the standard stuff. I got gypped on paid time off, overtime, and hours. Some of my other things are an employee stealing a work truck and driving to a gambling town, pawning work tools in said truck, gambling all the money away, getting drunk, crashing said work truck, falling asleep at the wheel, and found by the cops in the morning. He then complained that none of it was specifically forbidden in the handbook. We offered him Cobra because it was cheaper than proving in a hearing that his actions fell under gross incompetence. One lady cashed her check twice by mobile deposit, then taking it to a check cashing place. Once the company asked if we could make the 401k waiting period 10 years. Another guy took a loan against his 401k for custom motorcycle parts. That's not a complaint, it's just wow. I had a guy complain that we took too much for child support. He had 6 orders, a different lady each. That mother fricker was fertile. A pregnant EE who sat right by the break room every day and complained about the lady microwaving salmon for lunch. Every fricking day. Spoiler, it was me who complained. Had a voicemail from a former employee complaining that he was fired for bullcrap reasons. I saved that voicemail for a long time. But the one that takes the cake. A flirty married jerk at work winking at ladies, but he's connected so he gets a small talking to. The behavior stops. That's good, right? The receptionist doesn't show up to work. Then we get a call from the receptionist's husband. Turns out she was sleeping with that flirty jerk and doing crystal at work. It shouldn't have caused such a huge ruckus, but the flirty jerk is married to the owner's sister, plus crystal. She's in rehab and the flirty jerk has to tell his wife that it happened in their own bed. That spongy mofo wouldn't even spring for a cheap motel. I'm in HR. I've had a few what the heck complaints. Employee complained about other people's perfume affecting her allergies but wore heavy perfume herself. She said everything outside her home gave her allergies. With a doctor's note, she was allowed to work from home, but was more than happy to come to company events and get wasted. Yeah, that makes total sense. We also had an employee who was abrasive, rude, arrogant, and actively tried to get people fired, and he was a little too flirtatious with women as well. There were several complaints about the guy. The what the heck part of it was no matter how much documentation we collected about him, the executives refused to discipline him because he'd been at the company for 20 or more years, and had a unique wealth of knowledge that would be extremely hard to replace. We also had an executive who scared her department so much that people were afraid to use the bathroom. If some people took maybe a minute too long in the bathroom, the supervisors grilled the person about where they were and sometimes penalized them for that. The supervisors were under so much pressure from the exec, it took a long time because people were too afraid, but finally, some people came forward to us about the issue, and we put a stop to it immediately. HR is an interesting world, but it can be very stressful and at times lonely. Where I work, we have mandatory inappropriate behavior prevention training. The person who teaches it told us that they had, in the recent past, received some complaints about people holding the door open for them. The lady felt she was getting harassed because of it. They mentioned they didn't do anything about it except try to explain to the lady that the person was more than likely just being nice. I was threatened with a write-up for that once. The lady was walking down the hall with a container of documents in her arms. I was next to the door and held it. She even thanked me. A couple of days later, I was brought into the HR office with my manager and told my conduct was perceived as sexist. They had a write-up for me and I decided not to get pushed around. I told them I was being polite to someone with an armload of stuff, and unless the person who complained is going to do my job for them when I quit, they'd better tear that up. My manager and the HR rep had a talk, and the write-up was misplaced, never to be seen again. I don't know if that lady I held the door for was the one who complained. Probably someone else who wanted to stir the pot in the office. Talking to an employee about underperformance and she complains because I wasn't telling her how great she is after every text she sent. One of our biggest customers is a large electronics manufacturing company in France and the UK. We regularly get visits from them for meetings about something or other. At one such meeting, one of the visitors told us about Steve. Steve was always vanishing during lunch break and nobody knew where he went until he was discovered in the toilets one day. Another toilet user noticed a foot twitching beneath the cubicle door and called out, receiving no answer, so they tried the door and obviously it was locked. Fearing the worst, he went for help. The first aider came back with him and called, no answer, so he entered the adjacent cubicle, stood on the bog, and looked over the partition wall. Steve was whacking away like his life depended on it. He received a warning for that. A few weeks later it happened again, only this time it was a female first aider who got a free show. A month later it happened a third time, only this time Steve didn't plug his earphones into his smartphone properly, and so was broadcasting the guttural sounds of a hardcore adult flick throughout the toilet. This was Steve's third and final warning, and he was fired. He claimed unfair dismissal on the grounds that nowhere in the employee handbook does it say that what he was doing was forbidden on company grounds, and it was during his own time and not during work time, and he ended up getting his job back. What is the most chaotic good act that you've ever witnessed? My former employer had a metered parking lot. The lot was heavily monitored and they'd ticket you like the minute your crap expired. It was decidedly not good for business. People want to be able to linger in a coffee shop, you know? Besides, there was no reason for that lot to be metered anyhow. It was barely even adjacent to anything but our shop. Well, the meter just started breaking. All the time. It would get fixed by the city, but then a few days later, it'd be smashed or jammed or whatever. We asked if people would be towed, and the city was like, no meter, no tickets. One night I stayed a bit late to clean a freezer. When I left, I spotted my boss breaking the freshly fixed meter. She was like, "Yep, guess I'm a criminal, huh?" I once counseled one of my students in my homeroom to quit school, get a GED, and enroll in an apprenticeship program. Had I been caught, I would have been fired, since policy was to try and motivate all students to graduate. The kid was failing all of his classes, which were 9th grade courses, but he was smart, working a full-time job, and was already 18 years old and had a crappy home life. Honestly, that's the smartest path for a determined and hardworking kid who doesn't thrive in academia. Good for you. He probably makes good money and has a stable job now. I hope so. He didn't take the advice right away. As long as he was enrolled as a full-time student, his family kept getting a payout from funds due to his father's earlier death. He only came to school because his mum needed that payout to help raise his younger siblings. He planned to keep it up until he aged out of the funding thing in a few years, and then he could finally quit coming to school, get a GED, change jobs to something 9 to 5 finally. So he and I made a sort of pact of, if I don't harass you about your schoolwork, will you at least pretend that I do try to get you to do your schoolwork so that the principal doesn't figure out that I let you sleep in my class? I'll let you sleep all you need because I know you work late and you care about your little siblings. Meanwhile, here are practice materials for the GED. Do them when you can so you don't forget anything. As soon as you can do it, go and take that test. This confused a few classmates since they knew I wouldn't allow them to sleep in class even though I allowed him to do so without penalty. This was back in the late 1950s when my granddad was just a teenager, 14 to 15 years old, and he lived in a rural area in Arizona. This relatively new family in town was arousing suspicion because the wife and kids were always banged up. My grandpa's stepfather spoke to the man of the house and told him that people could see what he was doing to his family and he needed to stop. When he didn't stop, my grandpa's stepdad excused himself for dinner one night and left the house for the evening. The following day on the way to school, my granddad was on the bus and drove across a field where Family Man McGee was tied to one of the posts, beat to holy heck. My granddad, the bus driver, and the older student helped untie the guy and got him onto the bus so that he could get back home. No one talked about it, but apparently my grandpa's stepdad and a couple of other local guys caught up to the guy and beat the crap out of him so that he'd know how his defenseless family had it. Seeing he excused himself paints such a good picture of him politely dabbing the corners of his mouth with his napkin and slowly pushing back from the table, just to go and grab this dude and whip his butt. Haha, dope. This is indeed a satisfying story, one that we should probably try and replace with getting the cops and CPS involved in the modern day and age, though. When I used to walk home from class at night, there's this guy that would always call me gangster, major respect, but never anything else. For the reference, I'm a 19-year-old short Hawaiian girl and not very threatening looking. We'll call this guy JD. He'd ask how my day was, if I'm getting home okay, if I had any problems getting home. I began to look forward to it when I was walking home from class. A couple of times I'd be having a bad day, and this guy, who was outside, rain or shine, would always say hi to me. One day I was walking back, and he was talking to a buddy. Said buddy looked over at me and whistled, to which JD whacked him on the shoulder and said angrily, "Show some respect," and smiled at me and said, "Hope you have a good night, gangster. I hope he's doing all right." That video of the guy picking up litter thrown out of his car before physically throwing the passenger out. Threw into a park, turned on his hazard lights, waved the vehicle behind to alert them, and finally picked up and throwing out the trash. I don't care if it's staged or real, it was a delight to watch. A friend of mine had a roommate that stole a painting that was given to my friend. The roommate claimed that it was his and refused to return it, so I broke into their house at 2 a.m. and stole the painting back. I didn't tell anyone and kept it at my house until the roommate moved out. My friend and his painting are now reunited. The kid who stole it was a real piece of work. He would do this kind of stuff to everyone. Multiple people that I know have had this complaint about him, and he also brags about stealing stuff from people. The painting was given to my friend as a present while he lived with the roommate for the first time. They both moved out at different times but chose to live together in a new house. During the moving process, the roommate took the painting and hid it from my friend for weeks. Then at the new place, he revealed the painting to my friend and explained that he wouldn't be giving it back. I caught wind of this story and decided to take matters into my own hands. The city of Sao Paulo never cleaned its tunnels, so they got black from all the car's fumes over the years. This guy cleaned skull drawings in the soot using a rag and some water. The city sent officials to try and stop him, but hey, he was cleaning, no vandalism there. Eventually they sent someone with a hose to clean this guy's vandalism for good, only to discover how dirty the walls truly were.
That reminds me of the one where people spray-painted wangs on potholes in the road to force the city to fix them faster.
Something similar is happening in Cologne in Germany. They have these incredibly dirty walls, so some people took it upon themselves to do art with pressured sand. The city is against it, so they cleaned the parts of the walls where there is art. It's called reverse graffiti. If the city catches you, they fine you, since it's treated like real graffiti. There was a guy in my historical town of 800 people named Casey. Casey was the town police. We didn't have an actual police force, just the sheriffs from the county an hour away. So Casey was the law. He rode around on his bike, beating up people who did things like break into cars or harass people. Now, Casey himself wasn't exactly an upstanding citizen. He moved around a lot and dabbled in crystal, he grew huge green herb plants in the anise fields behind town, and was generally the kind of guy who looked shady. Except everyone in town knew Casey and everyone trusted him completely. If someone had a problem with the admittedly large population of crystal heads in town, they'd go find Casey and he'd bash heads in and shame people until they either left or towed the line. Imagine an incredibly white trash paladin with a series of crippling vices and a children's bicycle, and you have Casey. Casey also made wax out of green herb in his spare time. This is unsurprising because Casey can make literally anything. Anyway, I'm out of town one day and Casey comes knocking on my door looking to share his new bounty. When I don't answer the door, he decides to leave me some. A normal person would have put the wax on some waxed paper or in a container and then left it on my porch. Not Casey. Casey smeared a very generous amount of green herb wax all over my metal doorknob. Being Casey, he forgets to leave a note to tell me he did this. I came home late that night and put my hand on the doorknob and ended up screaming at my lungs because it was unexpectedly sticky. It was good wax though. About the Great British Bake Off hosts. When contestants do cry, out of frustration or disappointment generally, Mel and Sue stand near them and use unairable language, so the embarrassing footage is tainted and won't make it into the final edit. And strangely enough, I've heard that the unairable language is predominantly brand names rather than cursing.
Imagining Mel and Sue having an entire conversation completely in brand names, simultaneously ruining footage and making the upset contestant laugh.
Two older British women standing next to a man crying over a souffle just chanting the C word over and over. I love this image and I will think of it whenever I'm feeling low. Thank you, imaginary versions of Mel and Sue. When I was in high school, I was an extremely troubled teen. Legal trouble, substance usage, violence, mental illness, failing every class, the whole gamut. When I was in 11th grade, I was put into a special education program for people like me. And I did wonderfully. I adored my teachers and vice versa. One teacher in particular was amazing. She helped me set goals, get on track. She even helped me find my first real job. My senior year, I was doing really well in my classes, but this school was set up like a college in that you needed a set amount of credits to graduate, and I was woefully short. I still needed something like 22 or 24 credits, completely impossible to make up in my last year. Even though I was doing well, there was no chance I was going to graduate. So my lovely teacher started digging through my record. She somehow converted my community service, treatment stays, lockup time, and all the consequences for my behavior into credits. She turned institutionalization into fricking elective credits. By the end of my senior year, I had 1/2 credit to make up in summer school. I was able to walk with my class for graduation in June and received my high school diploma in August. To this day, I have no idea how she did it, but she absolutely changed my life. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. A Brazilian substance trafficker has been praised on social media as the modern-day Robin Hood after he kidnapped 2 nurses, stole vaccines and syringes, and ordered the medical staff to inoculate residents in one of the poorest areas in the country's southeast. Thomas Vieira Gomes has made headlines in the local press for acts of charity over the past year, even as authorities have issued successive warrants for his arrest. His most recent gesture of generosity to combat yellow fever, which has swept poverty-stricken areas of Brazil, has seen him lauded primarily as a hero rather than a villain. The substance gang leader, known on the street as 2N, held hostage 2 nurses from a vaccination center before transporting them and their equipment to one of the poorest favelas in Rio de Janeiro. The Latin American television station Telesur reported that Gomez's gang oversaw the nurses as they administered vaccinations over a 2-hour period in the Salgueiro favela. Once they'd finished administering the injections, they were returned to their workplace. In a report on the incident, the health workers said their kidnappers had treated them well and without any aggression. They said they'd complied with the hostage takers because many Salgueiro residents hadn't been given access to immunization centers. Despite the illegality of Gomez and his gang's actions, officials have praised the hostage-taking. Carlos Mink, a state deputy and a former minister of the environment, wrote on Twitter that the immunizations had been done as an act of public service. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I once caused traffic to come to a standstill on a 5-lane highway because a dog was running around and narrowly avoiding being hit several times. I pulled my car to the shoulder and jumped out to try and get the dog off the highway. Seeing this, several people got out of their cars to help. After about 10 minutes of us trying to chase this dog off the highway, the owner comes and the dog jumps right into her car. Everyone else gets in their car and leaves while I'm talking to the very relieved owner who couldn't believe all of these people got out to try and save her dog. Once she gets in her car and leaves, I realize I'm on the opposite side of a 5-lane highway from my car and no one is stopping to let me pass. Finally, a trucker must have noticed my predicament and starts cutting off traffic and slows down so that I could walk to get to my car. Another trucker follows suit and I'm able to get back to my car and back on the road. It wasn't until later that I realized how dangerous what I had done had been, but it was worth it to see the owner reunited with her dog. In conclusion, rallied an army of motorists to try and save a runaway dog. I was at a psychedelic rock concert in New York City that involved quite a bit of light moshing and crowd surfing. A really fun show overall. If you've never crowd surfed before, there's 2 main ways that it's usually done. Either you get up on the stage and jump off hoping that the crowd will catch you, or you ask a couple of strong-looking people around you to just lift you up. But at this concert, there was a third way. There was a big intimidating-looking guy in the middle of the mosh pit who apparently spent the entire concert down on all fours, getting people to jump off his back and start crowd surfing. He especially tried to wave in people who seemed nervous to try it. Overall, he must have gotten at least 50 people to crowd surf who had never tried it before. It was really a magical sight to behold. A guy at the local Dunkin' Donuts has to throw out donuts after someone tried to sue them for donating poisoned donuts or whatever. He gladly throws them out and then walks back inside. Whatever happens to them isn't any of his business, since it's trash anyway. He says he stopped trying to catch the mysterious garbage thief after 30 seconds of trying because he isn't paid enough to care.
At the Dunkin' Donuts my brother worked at, a homeless guy would politely stand next to the dumpster. The employee would place the bag of expired donuts in the dumpster and close the lid, then homeless guy would open the dumpster and take them out. It was on video and the manager required that the rules be followed. It was very lawful neutral. I think this would really be lawful good. The employees obey the rules and the homeless man would wait until protocol had been followed and everyone benefited. In case anyone is wondering, yes, the narrator chose the topic that made him think about Dungeons & Dragons the most. What can I say? I'm obsessed. My grandma was a kindergarten teacher for 50 years. Yes, you heard that correctly. She retired at the mandatory age of 72. It was a small community, mostly economically okay, but some poverty. Every few years, Grandma would develop a case of the clumsy. She'd trip while watering plants, and wouldn't you know it, but she'd spill a bit of water on the child that was unwashed and wore the same clothes for weeks. Nothing for it but to make up for the mistake by giving him a bath and clean clothes. Then return the clothes she messed up after she had cleaned them. A case of clumsy would last the whole school year, and oddly enough, she'd tripped near the same child every time. The case of clumsy often meant that she miscounted her grandchildren every morning and made an extra lunch. You there, would you mind taking this lunch so it doesn't go to waste?
There was this Thai infomercial about a lady who owns a marketplace, and she went to visit the people who rented her place and just started getting angry and wreaking havoc, breaking weighing scales, etc. She was filmed by the buyers and the video went viral and all these negative comments. Turns out the sellers she was angry with were playing tricks with the customers, like using rigged weighing scales, starting with 1 kilo. Wanksy would spray paint wangs around potholes so the government would fix them.
Some people plant trees in potholes for the same reason.
Be the change you want to see in the world. This one actually happened yesterday at work. A girl and her mum came in and got a few sandwiches, but the girl wanted a brownie. They were paying cash, but were like $3 short for the brownie. The girl didn't throw a fit or anything, but was pretty sad. I was just gonna let them take it, it's just a brownie, but before I can say anything, the guy behind them says, "I would like all but 5 of your brownies." Mind you, this is like 40 fricking brownies, which costs like $110 of just brownies. He proceeded to give the girl all of the brownies, and she needed 3 bags just to carry all of them. The girl was ecstatic, and everyone else was laughing their butts off. We'll never forget you, brownie man. I've never seen it personally, but I rather like Richard Ancrom's guerrilla public service. There was a sign on the freeway in Los Angeles area that was providing confusing directions, so he fabricated an overlay to Caltrans standards and installed it himself without any sort of government permission. Caltrans eventually found out, inspected it, and allowed it to stay. I like that eventually turned out to be almost a decade. My parents stole my neighbor's dog and rehomed it because they were mistreating it. My parents did this with a cat. The neighbor was throwing rocks at the cat because he didn't want the cat in the house. My dad confronted him and said, "F you, this is our cat now," and took the cat home. Our old tenants had a 14-year-old, declawed, flea-infested, super sweet kitty. She was so tiny, and when we kicked them out, he was going to just release the cat into the wild. So my dad said, "Go F yourself," and we took her in. She infested all of our other pets with fleas, but it was worth it. She got to live until 17 with us. So, you know how you'll have childhood friends, and eventually they go their separate ways, but you still stay in touch. My brother had a friend who got into crystal and had this little 8-pound, 8-month-old puppy. He would get high, blow smoke in the puppy's face, treat him badly, etc. One day he told a third friend from the group, "Man, I can't take care of this thing anymore. I'm just gonna dump him on the side of the road." So the second friend basically goes, "No, F that," and steals the dog the night before. A week goes by and he's being fostered at the good guy dog thief's house. He then asks my brother, "Hey man, your brother want a dog? I have a 9-pound wiener dog, who at the time could use a friend since I worked 9 hours a day and my wiener could be all alone." So of course I said, "Yeah, let's go visit this guy." I show up and unlock the back gate and am immediately met at eye level with 3 Great Danes. And running around in the bushes is this comically small, long-haired mutt. We go inside and I sit on the couch and the pup runs right up to me, gets in my lap, rolls over for a belly rub. It's like the guy never grew up in a crystal house. Needless to say, my wiener has a friend now. There's a group that does guerrilla ramp building to help with those mobility issues around the city. They've stepped up in so many of the areas that the city and businesses have been ineffective in maintaining code in, or outright illegally ignored it to the detriment of citizens. I freaking love them and I donate to them whenever I can. The next is the guys who spray paint wangs all over potholes so the city has to come out and fix them. If I see them doing this in real life one day, I'm stopping traffic to A, help, B, kiss them, because thank you. When I was still in my medical training in LA, I often saw a middle-aged gentleman putting coins into expired meters. The one time I saw a meter maid try to approach him and he ran off giggling. A few months later I saw him at a stop sign in a Maserati, basically the definition of chaotic good. This is a bizarre pseudo-crime with an illustrious history actually, as one commenter lays out. Paying meters for random strangers ahead of the meter enforcement personnel was part of a strange court case in my state recently. Basically, these college kids would walk around town just ahead of parking enforcement personnel, who were trying to issue tickets and feed the expired meters so no tickets could be written. This cost the city tens of thousands of dollars in tickets, so the city went after the kids for harassment. Lo and behold, after the city spent nearly $80,000 in legal expenses, the kids won because they were paying the meters and there's no law against that. I worked in daycare, and over the summer the kids had to bring their own lunch. One extremely undernourished and developmentally behind toddler only got things like chocolate frosting between slices of white bread for lunch. I started packing extra of my own lunch, with healthy stuff like yogurt and fresh vegetables, and sat her on my lap each lunchtime and coaxed her to eat it. It was totally against the rules and probably illegal, but the lead teacher and I couldn't just sit there and watch her literally eat frosting for lunch, so I got permission to take over myself. We just kept it quiet. I teach English as a foreign language to high schoolers. I have one class where the class clown is always trying to be disruptive, but his method is to shout encouragement whenever someone answers a question, like, "You a genius," or "You so intelligent." I have to act annoyed, because I know he'll stop doing it if he ever knew how much I freaking love it. Friend's mother found out her husband, my friend's father, was part of a group that made inappropriate content featuring children when the police showed up to arrest him. He had realized that they were about to get him, so was trying to escape the country via the local airport. He had told her his mother was sick and he was going to visit. She not only told the police where he was, but raced them to him, slide-tackled him at the airport before he disappeared, and was in the process of beating him to a pulp when the police arrived and pulled her off him. When my ex was arrested in front of our house for a similar offense, I said something along the lines of, "I want to kick his ass." The cop turned to me and with a very serious look on his face said, "Go ahead, we don't mind." That video where a guy paid for everyone's food if they were behind him just because two girls cut in front of him. I think it was at In-N-Out. The video's been reposted many times on any social media. Once in grade school, one of the kids was torturing another kid who was on the spectrum. He was running behind him and hitting him with a stick. They both ran right by me and I instinctively stuck my leg out and tripped the bully. He got bloody hands and knees for hitting the concrete. I got detention and a note sent home to my parents. I didn't care. I would have done it again. My parents took me out for ice cream, they were so proud of me. What are some wholesome historical facts not taught in school? In 2006, while the Ivory Coast was in the midst of a civil war, the opposing sides agreed to a ceasefire so they could all watch the World Cup. The break in fighting paved the way for a peace agreement a year later. During the Revolutionary War, a British general left his dog behind during a chaotic retreat. When the Continental Army found the lost dog, George Washington had a messenger go under a flag of truce to return the dog to its owner. Truly a man's best friend. Abraham Lincoln decided to grow a beard because of 11-year-old Grace Bedell. She had written him that she thought he would look more handsome and less sad with a beard, and women would tell their husbands to vote for him. So he grew a beard and was elected. On his way to his inauguration, he took a train and passed through her hometown in Westfield, New York, and met her. There was another great story of him where a rival politician called him two-faced. He came back with, "If I had a second face, do you think I'd pick this one?" The Formula One Grand Prix in 1976. After Niki Lauda crashed while hitting a barrier and catching a light, rival drivers Arturo Mazzario, Guy Edwards, Harold Ertel and Brett Lunger all stopped their cars and ran to Lauda's aid. There are many such instances of this happening during the 50s right through to the 80s, of championship drivers forfeiting a win to save a rival's life. And then he won his second championship the very next year. He also retired from driving, then came back and won another championship 2 years later by half a point. After a crash like he had, most drivers wouldn't be the same after. But not Niki, though. It just made him stronger. Rest in peace, Niki. During World War II, a German fighter pilot spotted a damaged American bomber, and rather than shooting it down, he decided to escort it to safety. Decades later, the two pilots found each other and became friends. There was a documentary some time ago where a man who'd been a Japanese prisoner of war met the Japanese man who'd essentially tortured him for years. After the war, the former Japanese officer had become a devout Buddhist, and upon meeting his former prisoner, he begged for his forgiveness for all the wrongs committed against him. They ended up good friends. That is a story of humbling examples of redemption and grace. I would love to hear how both of them were able to find the strength to take their respective parts in that story. When the pharaoh Mentuhotep II's harem daughter died around 2050 BC, he mourned. She was only 5 years old. Her tomb, touchingly, was inscribed with the pet name Meat. This is translated to kitten. The Candy Bomber. After World War II ended and Berlin was divided, the UK and US dropped food into West Berlin by plane. One pilot, Gail Halvorson, started to donate his candy rations to the children, and soon other pilots started doing the same. To let the children know that it was his plane, the one with the candy, they would wiggle the plane's wings before the drop. Word spread and more children would come, and it started a new PR campaign and started to change the mindset that Americans had of giving food to Europe. I always thought the story was really sweet. This is a pretty common PR move by the American military in modern times. Candy, music, movies, magazines. It's cheap as crap, life-changing to a child who's never had it. Positive feelings towards Americans from childhood. Yeah, but this guy did it of his own initiative, though. He saw a group of kids with nothing by the airport and gave them a few pieces of gum that they split up, and then when they ran out of gum, the kids that didn't get any sniffed the wrapper. He promised to bring more, and when the kids asked him how they'd know it was him, he told them that he'd wiggle his wings. He went back to the base and got a couple of his buddies to pool their candy rations, and he created 3 little parachutes to drop them. Later, the commander found out and gave his support. He didn't end his candy-dropping career in Berlin either, though. In 1994, he persuaded the Air Force to let him drop hundreds of candy bars over Bosnia-Herzegovina as part of Operation Provide Promise. Another, larger drop was planned and executed by Halvorson over Kosovo in 1999. Additional candy drops have been enacted in Japan, Guam, Albania, and across the United States. In 2003 and 2004, he advocated a similar series of candy drops over Baghdad as a humanitarian mission to be a ray of hope, a symbol that somebody in America cares. My friends from the Balkans have told me that the bitter combats of the wars after the breakup of Yugoslavia used to stop because both sides liked watching Mexican soap operas. Ah, Mexican soap operas, the true olive branch.
Telenovelas are the best. I watched many drama-filled hours at the laundromat. You don't need to understand a word of Spanish to follow the plot.
The India-Pakistan border is one of the most disputed ones in the world, giving rise to the world-renowned hostilities between India and Pakistan. There was a time once, a prominent Indian singer, namely Lata Mangeshkar, had gone to perform a concert for the soldiers there. As soon as the show began, Pakistani troops started firing rounds in the air, yelling obscenities and said, "We want to hear her voice too!" So the Indian forces turned up the speakers and pointed them towards the border. Pakistani forces returned the favor when prominent Pakistani singers came to perform for them.
I've heard that Indian and Pakistani soldiers get together to watch the India vs. Pakistan cricket matches.
The only reason the pilgrims stopped at Plymouth Rock was that they were running out of beer. They had to grow barley and hops. Based on Eric the Red's account, the first ritual done in the New World was when a German Balkan oarsman was found praising the berries identical to the ones used for brewing in his homeland. Ringo Starr once decided the Beatles didn't need him and decided to take a holiday with the intention of never coming back. When John, Paul, and George found out, they went all the way to where he was staying just to convince him to come back. As I recall, he got sick of all the bickering during the recording of the White Album, so it's actually Paul playing the drums in the first few songs. When Ringo came back, his drum kit was all decked out with flowers. Pennsylvania was founded by Quakers, who believed that the light of God shined in everyone regardless of ethnicity or religion. They were known for treating the indigenous people relatively well and welcomed the first synagogue in North America in Philadelphia.
That is true. They also created the basis for solitary confinement in prisons, so there are some drawbacks.
They didn't think of solitary confinement as extra punishment, but as a period to reflect without distraction and determine to build a better life. The idea was that if time for solitary reflection is good, then 24/7 must be even better. So it was born of good intentions and ivory tower thinking rather than extra sadism.
There was a dog in World War I that helped snuff out mustard gas, named Sergeant Stubby.
They released a movie about him in 2018, I think. The dog was a stray that joined a man on his deployment to France in World War I and saved the lives of countless American, British, and French soldiers. The Polish army had a gosh darn bear fighting on their side in World War II. Sergeant Wojtek the Bear. He's still on the regiment's coat of arms carrying an artillery shell. A very cute, alcoholic, chain-smoking bear.
Wojtek was a bear that served in the Polish 2nd Artillery Unit. During his service, Wojtek was a huge morale boost to the men, fighting multiple men in wrestling matches, eating lit cigarettes, and even foiling a Saudi Arabian plot to attack the camp by discovering a spy in the shower. Wojtek's unit was caught in an artillery battle. He looked around and began carrying artillery shells to the launchers like the men around him. For his service, Wojtek was promoted to corporal and was given an honorable discharge. Wojtek was placed in a local zoo where he was known to appear every once in a while, known to appear at a child's birthday party. Fellow servicemen from his unit were also known to come by and feed him lit cigarettes, where he also sadly died. In his honor, the Polish artillery unit changed its logo to a bear holding an artillery shell. In the Second World War, British Lieutenant General Commander Gerard Broadmead Roop was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross because a German admiral who witnessed his gallantry in action wrote to the British and recommended the award. There was a huge fight about African Americans using the public pool in Mr. Rogers' actual neighborhood, so he made an episode on his show where he and an African American guest were sharing a kiddie pool and talking about being nice to people even if they look or sound different. He taught a whole generation that racism isn't fair or right. The actor in the show was supposed to be a police officer, and Rogers actually dried his feet. The entire show was a very gentle and very subtle and ultimately very profound way of saying F you to bigots. During the filming of Gone with the Wind in 1939 on the Atlanta movie set, there was a long line of porta potties, each with a sign that said either white or colored. Lenny Blewett, an African-American extra, went to Clark Gable's dressing room and asked to speak to him. Gable immediately got on the phone and yelled at the director that if the signs weren't taken down, then they didn't have Clark Gable as Rhett Butler. And seeing as filming was put off for 2 years just to get Gable, that was one heck of a threat. Apparently Gable even accepting Blewett to enter his dressing room was considered a big thing, as Blewett was so low down the movie pecking order that he was not even going to be credited. I wonder if people back then complained as much as certain people do today when Hollywood got involved with politics.
Oh, let's be honest, they always have and they always will. Besides, during World War II, Qantas Airlines has never had a fatal commercial jet plane crash since its formation in 1921. They've never had a single fatal commercial jet crash and haven't had any fatal propeller plane crashes since 1951. They came close in 2010, though, with Qantas Flight 32. And they give beautiful pajamas. Pugs were bred by the Chinese to sit on the laps of emperors. They were quite literally designed to be lazy. The official breed of the House of Orange was the pug. This was because Prince William was alerted to Spanish assassins by his loyal pug, Pompey. How's that for a backup fact? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Mr. Rogers always said he was feeding his fish out loud because he heard that a little girl who was blind was worried about them, so he audibly said it so she wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. Not really a historical figure, but one that we all know. Mr. Rogers definitely counts as a historical figure, and you can't change my mind. John Stark, one of the rescuers of the remaining survivors of the Donner Party. Apparently, this 220-pound beast of a man rescued all 9 children by carrying them out of a deep sunken snow pit, and laughed and joked with them the whole time. In Summit Valley, the remaining rescuers discussed what to do and took a vote to only save 2 of the children in starved camp. That might have been all they could manage. The others would have to stay behind. John Stark would not abide that. That meant 9 people, mostly children, would die on the mountain, exposed to elements down in a very deep hole in the snow. John Stark decided he'd save all 9. Already shouldering a backpack with provisions, blankets, and an axe, he picked up 1 or 2 of the smaller children, carried them a little ways, then went back for the others. Then he repeated the process again and again and again. To galvanize morale, he laughed and told the youngsters they were so light from months of mouse-sized rations that he would carry them all simultaneously if only his back were broad enough. Once they were out of the snow, he would eat and rest, he said, but not before. He saved all 9. James Breen, one of those in the pit at Starved Camp, later said, "To his great bodily strength and unexcelled courage, myself and others owe our lives. There was probably no other man in California at that time who had the intelligence, determination, and what was absolutely necessary to have in that emergency." After Commodore Perry forced the opening of Japan to foreign trade, Japan signed many unequal treaties with Western nations. 1888, the 1888 Mexican-Japanese Treaty was the first time a Western nation treated Japan as an equal. In the late 1930s, fascism was advancing through the world and no one dared oppose it. Except for Mexico. Mexico was the only country that openly protested against the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, Italian and German involvement in the Spanish Civil War, along with the USSR, and finally, the German annexation of Austria. In Vienna, we named the square Mexikoplatz, Mexican Square, in honor of Mexico being the only country that protested the Third Reich's annexation of Austria. Horton Hears a Who was written for a Japanese friend of Dr. Seuss immediately following World War II. He wrote it as an allegory about the importance of forgiveness and humanity, in a time when much of the world was still bitter at Japan for their role in the war. Horton represents the United States who speaks up for Whoville, the Japanese, to remind them that a person is a person no matter how small. During the Crusades, when Richard the Lionheart had a fever, all he wanted at the moment was some fruit and a cold drink. His enemy, Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt who had seized control over Jerusalem, heard the news and sent him peaches, pears, and a shipment of ice from a mountain. When he heard that King Richard's horse had been killed, he sent him a bunch of new horses and a stable boy. When boys were shipwrecked on a deserted island, they actually did a great job of solving interpersonal conflict, creating a situation that is essentially the opposite of Lord of the Flies. The boys had set up a small commune with a food garden, hollowed out tree trunks to store water, a gymnasium with curious weights, a badminton court, chicken pens, and a permanent fire. Kolo fashioned a makeshift guitar from a piece of driftwood, half a coconut shell, and 6 steel wires salvaged from their wrecked boat. They lived better than some of us do. Humans are social animals. We generally don't devolve into chaos unless we have to. In 1952, Albert Einstein declined an offer to become the 2nd president of the State of Israel. Napoleon was once nearly killed by being trampled by hundreds of rabbits. He organized a hunt to celebrate a victory, but the guy got tame rabbits instead of wild ones. Instead of running when released, they looked directly to who they recognized as the guy in charge, Napoleon, because they knew the guy in charge meant food. Long story short, they all charged him. He ran, he got severely trampled and injured. I couldn't make this crap up if I tried. As a history graduate who loves that period, I had no idea that this had happened. It's amazing and totally in keeping with Bonaparte being a magnificent general to the public and kind of ridiculous in his personal life. There is a Lions student in Venice that has Viking runes graffiti on it.
The fact that the message is Kilroy was here is so beautiful to me.
Norsemen also wrote graffiti on the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, back when it was called Constantinople. It's taught in Ireland, but I don't know about the US. When we had the potato famine, millions of Irish were dying and emigrating, and the Choctaw tribe heard this, and despite being extremely poor, they managed to raise I think around $200. And now we've helped them out and raised $1.5 million to help them with COVID-19. That's about $6,500 in today's money. There's also a monument in Cork called the Kindred Spirit dedicated to the Choctaw tribe that was built in honor of the tribes. Imagine that kind of togetherness on a worldwide scale. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, there were a few Supreme Court cases about the color of margarine. The dairy industry couldn't compete as well with margarine dyed the color of butter, so some states tried to pass laws saying margarine had to be pink, which the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional. However, they also decided that yellow margarine was defrauding the public, so for a while margarine was sold white with a packet of yellow dye that you could mix in at home. In conclusion, they couldn't believe it wasn't butter. The family responsible for inventing the method of making margarine yellow during production lived close to my old neighborhood. Friends who would visit would ask about their huge house, and I always found it hilarious to explain how they got most of their wealth. Benjamin Franklin loved butterballs. Also, flatulating, naturalism, and doing the deed with old ladies.
I mean, yeah, but who doesn't love those things?
Tutankhamun's most prized possession was his meteoric iron dagger. Museum visitors are impressed by the gold instead.
In Tutankhamun's day, meteoric iron would have been rare on an unimaginable scale, whereas gold was the standard currency every merchant had had. In the present day, anyone with $20 can buy meteoric iron trinkets on Etsy, whereas gold is hardly seen in quantities larger than a ring or necklace. On Christmas Day 1914, both sides of World War I celebrated Christmas together with songs and games. This type of celebration happened over the whole front in Belgium and France. The soldiers talked to each other like they weren't in war together. Many soldiers wrote in their diary that they didn't expect the enemies to be so kind and friendly, and that they wanted to meet with them when the war was over. But a few days later, the leaders of the armies found out about the celebrations and forbid any future meetings between the two sides. There were a few attempts to reconnect during Easter and Christmas, but the soldiers who attempted were punished or killed. An actual true fact about Liechtenstein is that Switzerland accidentally invaded Liechtenstein during a Swiss army exercise, when some soldiers got lost and accidentally walked into Liechtenstein, on 2 separate occasions. So Switzerland has accidentally invaded Liechtenstein twice. The Chicago Public Library originated with a donation of books from Queen Victoria following the Great Chicago Fire. She assumed the city's library had been burned down. Homework was originally a punishment for bad students, and now it's a regular thing. Pirate ships were actually pretty great, relatively speaking. They were very democratic, and pirate crews were pretty well cared for. Also, they took assault against women pretty seriously, i.e., they killed you for it. Also, pirates were really rare. The vast majority of seafaring raiders were privateers, which were basically mercenary ships who were hired by a country to attack the shipping of an enemy nation. If you kept everything for yourself, pirates. If you paid your fair share to your monarch, privateer. There was a Scotsman named Bill Millen who stood on the beaches at Normandy during D-Day, calmly playing the bagpipes as shells and machine gun fire streaked past him. The Germans didn't shoot him because they figured he must have been insane. Pipers had traditionally been used in battle by Scottish and Irish soldiers. However, the use of bagpipes was restricted to rear areas by the time of the Second World War, by the British Army. Lovat, nevertheless, ignored these orders and ordered Millen, then aged 21, to play. When Private Millen demurred, citing the regulations, he recalled later, Lord Lovat replied, "Ah, but that's the English War Office. You and I are both Scottish, and it doesn't apply." When persecuted Zoroastrians from Persia came to the kingdom of Sanjan in the west coast of India as refugees, the king wasn't sure that he wanted to offer them refuge, so he sent them a full glass of milk, implying his kingdom was full. The leader of the Zoroastrians added some sugar to the milk and sent it back to imply the refugees would become part of the kingdom and make it sweeter.
They got to stay, and though they're a micro-minority, they're one of the most successful communities which has left its imprint on every aspect of India. Under a Supreme Court ruling in the 1800s, tomatoes are considered a vegetable because you can't make a dessert out of them. The ruling came from California having tariffs on fruits because at the time it was believed that only people with a bit of wealth could buy fruit, because they're only really used to make a dessert. Tomatoes were part of the tariff, so people protested, and the Supreme Court removed tomatoes from the tariff, meaning they aren't a fruit in the eyes of the law. I was on vacation in Germany over spring break. They have these frog fences. These fences keep the frogs from crossing the roads and getting run over. At the end of the day, somebody comes and gathers the frogs and helps them across the road. Not only in Germany, and fences are not only to keep the frogs safe, but also the drivers. So many frogs might pass a stretch of road that it gets slippery from all the crushed frogs and somebody could get hurt. But where I live, they started installing blue reflectors on the road markers which are designed to warn wildlife, mostly deer, and keep them from running onto the roads. Captain Morgan actually existed. The face of the well-loved rum, Captain Morgan brand, was a real guy. He was a Welsh privateer who fought alongside the English against the Spanish in the Caribbean in the 1660s and 1670s. His first name was Henry, and he was knighted by King Charles II of England. His exact birth date is unknown, but it was sometime around 1635. He died in Jamaica in 1688, apparently very rich.
Henry Morgan is largely regarded as one of, if not the greatest pirates who ever lived.
When you run down the list of notable pirates whose names you recognize today, like Black Bart Roberts, Blackbeard, Captain Kidd, Calico Jack Rackham, Charles Vane, and the others, they all had one thing in common. Not a one of them lived to enjoy much, if any, of their ill-gotten gains. They were either killed in battle, captured and wound up dancing the hempen jig, or left to rot in a gibbet. Henry Morgan actually won at the game of piracy, if you consider the end goal to get rich and live the good life, by actually retiring, receiving a royal appointment as governor of Jamaica, bought a plantation, and spent his remaining years actually enjoying his wealth and drinking with his friends. What's an unethical way that people save money? I work downtown, in a city where monthly parking is easily $150 or more per spot. My wife and I both have to drive due to schedules, so it would be double that. Found out that the casino downtown gives you free parking daily if you bet $10. So we go and play roulette daily. She bets $10 on red and I bet $10 on black, and each ask for our parking validation. One of us always wins, which doubles one of the $10 bets. So we get our $20 back. Boom! Free parking. There's been the odd time it's hit zero. In that case, we each just lose $5 each and parking costs us $10 total for the day. I accidentally discovered that the laundry machines in my building take 20 euro-cent coins instead of the $2 coins. The last time I was in Germany, I saved as many as I could, and now a load of laundry costs about 50 cents instead of $4. Imagine the laundromat owner going to collect the change. Who the frick is depositing euros? I only found out about it when I paid $2 into the machine and it spat out the 20-cent piece. So somebody else out there is doing it too. They'll never catch me. I went to Thailand and the 10 baht coin looks nearly identical to the 2 euro coin, so I took a few. If I'm on a festival or in a club, I sometimes pay with them because everything is overpriced and dark anyway. I just don't use it in normal shops. They're around 25 euro cents each, so it's a great return on investment. I don't get how you guys are able to use similar-sized coins in vending machines. I have enough trouble getting the machine to accept the actually correct coin whenever I try, let alone one that's a bit different. I never got removed from an employee discount plan for a job I left almost 7 years ago. I get 25% off every month on my phone and internet. Similar but not unethical. My work pays me $40 a month for me to use my phone as my work contact number. My monthly bill is $35. When I was in 6th grade, they would give IOU slips to anyone that forgot their money for lunch. You were supposed to put your name and they would bill you later. I always wrote Cornelius Origami. My name is not Cornelius Origami. Poor Cornelius Origami. He got charged for so many lunches wrongfully. The financial burden caused him to eventually fold. I do like to imagine there's a cartoonish figure in this individual's town who's charged a fortune in lunch fees every month, and his monocle always pops out when he gets hit with the bill. When checking into a hotel, ask if they give Walmart employees a discount. More often than not, you get a 10% discount, and I've never been asked to prove it.
Does this hotel give Walmart employees a discount?
Yes, may I see your employee ID?
I don't really work there, I'm just really curious about their employee benefits.
I still use student discounts whenever I can. Not a student. I graduated in 2013. My senior year, they came up with a new ID card which doesn't expire until 2018.
My college ID doesn't have an expiration date. I've been out of college nearly 4 years now and still use it.
I buy my movie tickets at the automated kiosks in the theater, but I select the senior citizen's price. Spoiler alert, I'm not a senior citizen. The high school kid ripping tickets always gives a slight pause and then decides it's not worth the hassle to call me out on it. In the 90s, I was starting my last year of school. You could have school dinners paid for in advance termly by your parents, or you could bring a packed lunch. I was a packed lunch kid, but if you forgot your packed lunch, you could get a school dinner and pay for it the next day. One day, I forgot my lunch, so I got in the school dinner queue and waited to be served. I thought they'd realize I wasn't a school dinner child and tell me to bring the money tomorrow, but they didn't. The food was actually not bad, and the next day I tried my luck again. They just assumed my parents had paid and nobody bothered to check. I got free school dinners for about a year.
At my school, they had free lunches for kids who were low income, but to avoid embarrassment, they were given cards that looked identical to everyone else's card. The computer would just not charge their account. My friend would just give his card to other people and they'd get free lunch. The system had no check to see if the same card bought 7 lunches in one day.
I haven't bought paper towels in 2 years because I've been stealing napkins from Chipotle every week. I didn't say I ate there, guys, just that I take the napkins, and yes, it's a crappy thing to do, but isn't that kind of the point of this story grouping? Back when payphones were a thing, you could carefully shove the fat McDonald's straws into the change slot in my city and get free calls.
Dollars to dimes, it was a homeless guy that figured this out,
who just thought he'd try taking a sip of whatever fluid might have collected in the payphone's coin reservoir. Hey, you never know. Sneaking into meetings you're not invited to and stealing donuts and kolaches. I pretend that I'm gay. The gym I go to charges $50 less if you register as a couple and not as single. I don't have a significant other, so my best male friend and I registered as a gay couple. The first day, the manager almost asked us to make out to prove it. He decided it was homophobic, so he stopped. When we come in, he's always staring while we use the machines together, like he wants to catch us doing something sexual.
This sounds like the plot for a ruckus buddy comedy.
Starts out with the buds pretending to be a couple for the gym membership. Then they start doing other couple things to save money. Then they realize they're in love.
A Frenchman here. Some people create groups where they give 5 to 10 euros a month. The subway in Paris costs about 60 euros a month. And they use the subway or other public transport without paying. When one of them gets caught, the group uses the money to pay the fine.
So, like an insurance company for fare evasion. I'd be more worried about the guy running it taking the money and disappearing. When we were kids, we discovered the hotel by the beach had a free brunch thing on the top floor every day. You needed to use a keycard in the elevator to access the top floor, but we would go to the floor under it and walk up the last flight. I assume some kind of fire code restriction was why the stairs weren't key-coded. As dumb kids, we were greedy and went too often and got kicked out eventually, but it was nice while it lasted. They had a deal so that their guests could use the pool at the hotel next door too, and no one ever checked, so we would do that as well. I pay for Netflix. I have 3 friends who use the account. They always pay for pizza and snacks at any social gatherings. I've been a bit depressed and haven't spoken with my friend for a few weeks. He just changed the password and I don't want to ask him what it is right away, because it's effed up that I'll only talk to him to get the Netflix password. In high school, I had a good friend who worked solo in a small fast food burger place inside a gas station, East Coast chain called Bullets. I would order a small side of fries and he'd give me $30 worth of chicken fingers, bacon burgers, onion rings, curly fries, etc. Over the summer, large groups of friends would go and order $10 worth of food and 12 people would eat like kings. We did this for years and nothing ever came of it except my friends and I all got fat during the summer, eating 4,000 calories from that place most days. Thanks, Christian, you're a bro. When I was a kid, one of my friend's mothers, a pediatrician, would dilute children's vaccines to save money. Rightfully, she lost her medical license. Jesus Christ! How much would that woman save by doing that? I can't imagine it would be more than one small shopping trip per month. And pediatricians are generally paid all right, aren't they? Insanity. When I got the cooked breakfast option from the canteen at work, you're allowed 5 items. I always take extra bacon and hide it under the beans. That's free bacon.
In a similar note, the food court in my college only allows you to take 1 item out. I take 2 cookies at a time by hiding one in my pocket and eating one as I go out. All for those tasty frickin' cookies.
When I was 8, I went with my mum to set up my first bank account after an uncle gave me £100 as a Christmas gift. He lived abroad, so I didn't see him often. For some reason, they set it up wrong, so the system recorded me as a member of staff. I'm now 29, and I still have the same bank account. And now, I get offered staff rates on loans and credit cards. It's great! Does anyone else use GameStop as a bank? I got really teed off with the US bank because I kept overdrafting my accounts even though I opted out of overdrafting. And the same thing happened with my credit union when I got a debit card. Now whenever I get paid, I go pre-order a whole crapload of games. Whenever I need money, I go to the nearest GameStop and ask for my money back on a game I don't want and make a withdrawal. The lines are shorter at GameStop than at the bank, and I can trade in old games and have money go straight into my savings account. GameStops are just as prevalent as banks in my town, and I work at a mall, so it's even more convenient than running an errand to the bank or using an ATM and getting charged. The GameStop people are starting to catch on that I'm just moving money around and only buying one pre-ordered game a year, if that, but there isn't crap they can do about it. The best part is, since I always pre-order every game coming out, I'm still guaranteed to get all of the exclusive content, whether or not I'm sure I want a certain game. It's like they're rewarding me for banking with them. I don't think GameStop is FDIC insured. Whole Foods gives a 5-cent discount if you bring your own bag. I pick up a single habanero pepper, free pepper. If someone went to all that trouble, I'd say go for it. If I'm planning on going out and fancy a certain restaurant, I go online maybe 2 weeks in advance, sign up to their mailing list, and give my birthday as being the day I'm planning on going. Most places give you some sort of freebie for your birthday. As a totally ethical aside to what this guy is doing, signing up for loyalty programs at any and all of your local restaurants will save you a ton of money when you go out. Every day I get email coupons for discounted food, BOGO deals, free appetizers or desserts, and of course the free birthday food. The week of my birthday is a tour of coupon redemptions. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In DC, we have a computer program that lets you pay for your metro fare with pre-tax payroll deductions. In theory, you're supposed to have 2 metro cards and only use the pre-tax card for commuting to and from work. I've never met a soul that carried said 2 cards. As some of you have pointed out, and I've now realized, there is no clear federal rule that demands this. That said, I've poked around on a few different employers' websites to see what the Smart Benefits form looks like, and many of them have similar language to this example, not from my employer but a different one. I buy my college textbooks as ebooks on Amazon. I remove DRM and convert them to PDFs. I return ebooks to Amazon claiming something along the lines of, I decided to drop the class, free college textbooks, super easy with Caliber. In most cases where that might not work, I can typically find a torrent, though I'm much more wary of these sources. At this point, it occurs to me that it may be necessary to warn you all, but do this at your own risk. It's not unheard of for Amazon to slam down the ban hammer if they're suspicious of fraudulent activity, and evidently, when it comes down hard. I commute to work by train and I have a subscription ticket for it. But I don't pay what I really have to. I have to change trains on my way, but the ticket really only is for one train route. No one checks all the zones marked on my ticket, only if the date is right. I first drove part of the way by car, but then decided to try and leave the car at home to save me some money. I didn't want to get a pricier ticket to just try it out for 1 week to see if it works, and I get to work on time. I was hoping I don't get controlled, and if I would, I'd come up with a stupid excuse that my car is in the workshop. However, I was controlled, but no problems, no questions. I then decided to always use the train for the whole way to work, even if I had to get a pricier ticket. But I just never got that pricier ticket. Decided to see how long I'd get away with it. So far, no problem. This saves me about £30 per month. I do this for about a year now, and my ticket gets checked almost daily. Servers almost always underreport cash tips to some extent. My wife and I go to the same university. She attends and I work there. A plus to me working there is that she attends for free. A single parking permit is $850 per person for 2 semesters. We didn't want to have to pay $1,700 for 2 permits, so here is what I did. 1. Purchased my own permit for $850. Go to the permit office 2 weeks later. At the beginning of the semester, the first 2 weeks are free parking, and I say that either, oh, I just sold my car and forgot I left the permit sticker on it, or I just had my windshield replaced and forgot to take off my permit sticker before they took the windshield. They charge me $40 for the replacement ticket and then mail it to me. And there we go. $890 for 2 permits is much better than $1,700 for 1. The only risk is that they scan the original permit's barcode because it was deactivated when I reported it as lost, but it's been 2 years of doing this trick and they haven't bothered to check it yet. I also used to heat the used stickers on my community college textbooks and sell the books back to the college and get a bit more money for them because they weren't considered used without the sticker. Leave it to students and university personnel to find ways to scrimp and save. Respect, my friends. Let the rich kids make their parents pay these kinds of bills. My girlfriend never put her license plates on her car, 2.5 years into her lease, and she still uses the dealer placeholder. This lets her use toll roads and fast lanes without paying. She's never been pulled over, but I bet that's going to be an awkward conversation someday with the way she speeds. Just to clarify, she does pay her registration and receives her plates. She just permanently stores them in her glove box. They are gonna tow her vehicle when she gets pulled. Self-service checkout at the supermarket. No, I don't have any bags, rustle, rustle. You don't need to charge me 5 pence, rustle, rustle, rustle. I bought my PlayStation 4 a little over a year ago, used. Netflix is still signed into the previous owner's account. I wonder if they ever think, who's watching this crap? Let's say you have a relatively new car, no older than 5 years, that needs new tires. Find a rental car company that has your same car and rent it for the day. Go home and swap your wheels with the new car. When you return the car, they don't check tire tread levels, and unless you swapped with bald tires, the mechanics probably won't notice. Also, you're a scumbag if you do this. I was buying makeup last month and used the self-checkout. When I scanned my eyeliner, the machine kept telling me to place the item into the bag. Turns out the eyeliner was too light to register, so I threw a heavier, more expensive piece of makeup into the bag instead, without scanning it. The machine was satisfied then. Got as much student loan as possible from the government, €20,000, even though I don't need it, since the interest rate is so ridiculously low, 0.01% at the moment. Since the inflation is higher than the interest rate, I'm saving money that way. So, my job sent me to Japan several times. The train system is interesting there, so we found fun ways to exploit the system. We figured out how to abuse the heck out of station passes. When you get on any train, you can buy a ticket to your destination, or you can buy a station pass, which is about 50 cents. When you get off, you scan the station pass and it calculates how far you've ridden and charges you the difference. When we got off the plane in Tokyo, we bought a dozen station passes for Tokyo Station. Then, when we arrived at our destination, about $100 fare from Tokyo, we purchased a month-long ticket between adjacent stations. This ticket will let you on and off the train at either of those stations for a month. It's very cheap because fare between 2 close stations is only a few bucks. Travel to Tokyo, hop on a base station, use month pass, hop off in Tokyo, use station pass. Cost for $100 ride, 50 cents. Travel home. Hop on in Tokyo with station pass, hop off at base station with month pass. Cost for $100 ride? 50 cents. Also fun for sightseeing. You can ride the trains all over Japan for free as long as you don't leave the stations. Buy rotisserie chicken from a store, eat 3/4 of it, and return it claiming it was undercooked. I had a lady do this every week at a store I used to work at. I hated her with every ounce of my being. And that's why cooked chickens are $8.99 instead of $5.99. Fun facts, if you have a Costco membership, you can literally return anything. I worked in the bouquet department and we had a guy return flowers he bought the previous year's Valentine's Day, completely wilted and crumbly. He said they didn't last long and due to their return policy, we had to return it. I don't encourage taking advantage of this because Costco is a fantastic company to work for, but if you're in a bad situation, you can use it to your advantage. You really can return anything after any amount of time. My uncle was shopping for a new barbecue at Costco. He gets talking to the salesman or someone about how his previous barbecue, which he bought at Costco, had worked for 10 years but was starting to go. They told him to return it and exchange it for a new one. He did that and they accepted it, after 10 years of use. As a college student, stealing silverware from the dining hall has saved me a lot of money. Plot twist, your tuition is covering the cost of replacing silverware stolen by previous students. So really, then you're losing money if you don't steal the forks. Some of these stories have made the narrator aware for the first time of the completely normal fact of life of prices being inflated to adjust for the risk of theft. You jerks, I'm paying more because of you? If I can't find it on demand for free or on Netflix, I'm pirating it. The problem is that I wouldn't mind watching something on a TV channel most of the time, but I'm not going to pay $15 a month just so I can watch one TV show at the time the TV channel broadcasts it with ads. For half the price, you have Netflix. I can legally share Netflix, so it's only $4. It's full HD and 5.1 sound as well. What's the downside? Nothing. So I'm simply not going to pay that much. What's the point of that? Sometimes, when the bus driver isn't looking, I put in $2 and a nickel instead of $2 and a dime. Oh, you disgust me. Someone else is paying for my internet. A few months ago, I went online to see why I haven't been getting a bill, expecting to see a huge balance and a disconnect notice. Instead, I see my account is set up for autopay, with someone else's credit card. This has been going on for a little over a year, and I do not intend to raise any flags about it. In my city, you can either load a monthly subscription or just load a set amount of money into your bus pass. A monthly is $100. So when I was busing to work, I used to just load $50 and not tap my card on morning rides. I would only tap on my way home because the Trainspo cops were more likely to be patrolling in the afternoons. Now I drive to work, but the monthly parking pass is $200. Ain't nobody got time to pay for that, so I just park on the side of the street where there are 2-hour parking zones. But I usually don't move my car every 2 hours. It seems those rarely get checked because in the 2 months I've been doing this, I've only got 2 tickets, at $50 a ticket. It's still the cheapest option, but I don't even bother paying the tickets because I work in a different province than the one I live in. And as far as I can tell, there's no collaboration between the two vis-a-vis traffic tickets, so they don't follow up to make sure you've paid it. Not exactly unethical, but I dumpster dive. This year, I've picked up a microwave, a nearly new $200 DeLonghi espresso maker, a 52-inch Sanyo TV, technically a dumpster, and everything in it is private property. My landlord likes me a lot because I've been in the same house for 5+ years renting, so I get 2 parking spaces included for free. I only have 1 car, so I've been renting the other spot to different neighbors for $65 a month. Free parking and $780 a year for no work on my part. What's the best case of instant karma that you've ever seen? While working for the fire department on a call for a multi-vehicle rollover accident on the interstate, we got on the interstate 1 exit away, running into traffic, so we moved over to the emergency lane with lights and siren blaring. We were about halfway there and a BMW pulls in front of us trying to cut through traffic. He didn't even look. I laid into the air horn and he came to a complete stop with his middle finger out the window. I've had a lot of people do stupid things when seeing lights coming at them, but this guy was being a butt for the sake of being a butt. He got out of his car and started screaming at us. Meanwhile, he was blocking the only fire engine and 2 ambulances available. People were really hurt half a mile away and he was making his stand because we honked our air horn at him for blocking us. I looked out at my mirror to see a highway patrolman running between lanes towards us. He was teed off. BMW boy was immediately arrested, his pretty car got pushed out of the way into a ditch, and he went to jail. The people in the accident were hurt badly, and 2 cars had to be cut open to get people extricated from bent metal. It was frustrating. I don't know how you didn't beat the living crap out of him. I would surely not have had the patience. Watching him get tackled and dragged into the mud and then having to get his car pushed into the same mud kind of made it all worth it. Used to commute to DC from 40 miles away. Driving home one evening, this guy decides he has to merge into my lane now. Beeping and all, he pushes me off the road. The car behind me was a cop. As soon as I was on the shoulder, lights and sirens went off and the dude was pulled over. Where I used to live was a rural area on the outskirts of a small city in Australia. I was heading home from work one night and the road back to my place is several kilometers long and dead straight. Cane fields on either side and no streetlights, so it was very dark. Many people speed down the road because it's a back road and rarely patrolled by the police. I was driving along doing the speed limit, 100 kilometers per hour, and this guy comes roaring up behind me with his high beams on. He sits right behind me, then tears around to overtake and takes off doing at least 120 kilometers per hour. Less than a minute later, he must have hit the dirt shoulder and he starts to lose control, before hitting a slight dip and he literally flies through the air into a cane paddock. At this point, it's a mixture of absolute shock and wanting to laugh my butt off. Then the red and blue lights flash up ahead, not 50 meters from the guy. I'd never seen a cop on this road before that night, so I couldn't believe it. I pulled up to ask if he needed any help from me and he goes, "Nah, love, you get home. I got this frickin' turkey." Double instant karma. Why is it that any authority figure, be it pilot, cop, or businessman, suddenly becomes so much more charming with that accent? Or maybe the New Zealanders watching would disagree with me. Anyway, on with more stories. It was my own karma. I was in 8th grade. I was standing on a bench when I watched some girl fall over in the yard. I started laughing and pointing and then went to lean back onto the fence that was behind the bench. Turns out it had broken off where I was standing and I fell straight through and into the mud. I'm in the New York City subway. A guy elbows me out of the way to get into the turnstile first, yelling vaguely that he has a train to catch. No crap. Through the turnstile, turn the corner, and there are a few cops set up near a folding table, and he gets pulled for a random search. I work at a grocery store. I was stocking instant noodles on a big sale display. All I had was a cheap 2-step stool, you know, the one with the bar that runs across the top shelf. Reaching down to the stool from the shelf I was standing on was about 3 feet. I had a 60% chance my foot would land on the top bar and collapse the thing. I asked a co-worker to use his shoulder as a handle as I got down. My supervisor called me a princess for getting assistance. Soon after, he was stocking the 2-liter Coke bottles on a sales display. He tried to get down. He took the 40% success rate jump onto the step, hit the top bar, the stepladder collapsed. He broke his arm and took down half the display. I just clocked out and left before they told me to clean up the spilled soda all over the place. Sometimes the malevolent gods of retail can smile on a poor worker. The beauty of that moment is truly unable to be explained to those who have never been a retail worker before. It's not that they smile upon one worker, but rather direct their malevolence towards another in a larger portion. I was driving home on the highway during a horrible blizzard at night. The roads were extremely slick and dangerous. I was going about 30 miles per hour. My daughter was a newborn and it was the first time I'd ever driven in the snow with her. I was nervous. Some jerk in a huge truck is doing 65, passing everyone in the slow lane and just being really risky and ignorant of the conditions and other drivers in general. He passed me and I was like, "You're gonna crash, bro." Right at that moment, the guy fishtails, loses control, and crashes into a ditch. Don't worry, I'm not a sadist, he was completely fine. I know this because I saw him emerge from the truck and do a little angry freakout dance. His truck wasn't fine. That's what you get for endangering others during a blizzard. During a drive through Philly in standstill traffic, some butthole decides to use the shoulder as a lane to cut in line. The vehicle he ended up cutting off was a state trooper, an instant whoop whoop, and told to pull off the highway over a loudspeaker. I couldn't stop laughing. The time I had my shoes stolen. I was 17, went to a party where there were kids from 2 different high schools. When I went inside, I took off my brand new Nike Air Matter shoes that I'd just brought for $140. Hours later, when I went to leave, my shoes were gone. We had an idea of who'd taken them, a guy from the other school, but didn't have any proof. I was so sad and so embarrassed. I had to drive home in my socks. Long story short, a week later, Monica, the girl who threw the party, shows up on my doorstep holding something behind her back. Turns out she went to a party and saw the guy who stole my shoes, wearing them. When he took them off after a smoke break, she snagged them. Now, standing in front of me, she reveals my Nikes. She told me the best part was watching him look for them, just like I had, and then leaving in his socks. Walking down the San Antonio River walk, the guy in front of us got pooped on by a bird. My friend turned to me and says, "Sucks to suck." That friend literally got pooped on as well, right after the words had left his mouth. Butthole kid in middle school kept trying to steal my cell phone. It was a cheap flip phone, but he'd do it just to tee me off. Our school had a rule that you couldn't have your phone out in class. Teacher left the classroom for a second to have a brief word with an administrator. This jerk grabbed my phone. The teacher came back in a moment later and caught him red-handed with my phone out. She wouldn't believe it wasn't his phone. He got detention. Back in high school, I was kind of being a jerk to a girl I was friends with. Nothing too bad, just some friendly teasing, but still. Then I turned around and fell down a flight of stairs. Even mid-fall, the karma and the justice didn't escape me. We both found it pretty funny. If I've learned anything from similar stories, you guys are happily married now. The narrator has swept the follow-up replies to the story, and this does not in fact seem to be one of those meet-cute type stories. At the end of the day in locker room after gym class, this freshman kid who was really popular and always talked a lot of crap started messing with this guy who was kind of awkward and kind of got picked on a lot. Apparently they got in each other's way in flag football or something. Awkward guy ignores cocky kid for a while until the cocky kid pushed him. Awkward guy had enough and hit the cocky guy in the face 3 times before he hit the ground, knocked his front teeth out. As we were all leaving school and talking about it, the overall consensus was, well, that's what happens when you talk that much crap. My dog tried to eat my sushi while I was away from the table for 1 second. I came back to missing wasabi and a disgusted-looking dog. The first time I ordered sushi, I was on a date. I thought the wasabi was avocado paste. I stole my date's avocado paste and put a generous amount on all of my sushi bites. I kept repeating, I had no idea sushi was so effing spicy. My date couldn't figure out what I was talking about as snot ran down my face, as the sushi we shared was definitely not the spicy kind. I finally admitted that I stole the avocado paste, and my date couldn't stop laughing. I totally deserved it. In the UK, kids wear blazers and ties to school, and a common bullying tactic that jerks use is to run up to kids, pull their ties so they get really tightly knotted. On the bus home, the bus was really full, and I was standing in front of one such bully. He grabbed my tie just as the bus had to brake sharply. He lost his footing, and the only thing keeping him upright was the fact that he was holding my tie. He had grabbed the wrong bit, but it wasn't knotted. It simply untied and he fell on his bum. That was the last time I was knotted. In my school, everyone had clip-on ties, and because of the strict dress rules, some bullies would yank them off and wouldn't give them back. However, some people had proper ones, usually as a replacement for losing them. One of my friends had one, and some butthole yanked it really hard, causing said friend to accidentally headbutt the dude in the face, giving him a nosebleed. I was working in a supermarket when a panicked customer came up to me and said he'd accidentally left his cash in the ATM, and had anybody handed it in. I was about to say no when customer B appeared behind him and said he'd been trying to catch up to him. He had been queuing behind him at the ATM and saw what happened, so he had got the money for him. It was £200, so a decent amount. Customer A was super grateful and offered him some of the money, but he wouldn't take it. Customer B then bought a scratch card, scratched it, and found out he'd won £5. Not a whopping amount of karma, but karma nonetheless. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. At a job as a mechanic, I got a part that was completely correct, except the electrical plug was a different shape. I found out after I installed it. For the record, it did plug in, just didn't have long enough prongs to communicate. I had to order the right part again and take this one off and install the right one, all while getting paid to put the correct one on. I lost about 1.3 hours. My coworker laughed and said, "Bet you won't make that mistake again. Pay attention next time." His very next job, he put all 4 tires on backwards. Some tires are directional. I said the same thing to him. I knew I would use it against him, I didn't know it would be that soon. In conclusion, I made a hard-to-spot mistake and a guy made fun of me. His very next job he made a very easy-to-spot mistake and I made fun of him. My dad told me this story. He was driving from the store when traffic got really bad. About a mile ahead, there was an accident that had brought traffic to a crawl. Crap happens, my dad decided to be patient about it. Others weren't so patient. People began driving on the shoulder in order to get ahead of the traffic. This teased my dad off. We all know how this goes. We do the right thing and are punished for it, whereas these buttholes are skipping in front of traffic and will probably get away with it. He thought about following the stream of cars onto the shoulder but decided he'd do the right thing and wait. As he got closer, he saw 2 cops in the parking lot. One cop was directing all of the shoulder drivers into the parking lot, while the other wrote all of those drivers' tickets. He described it as one of the most satisfying things he's ever seen. I was driving into a construction zone where 3 lanes converged into one. Right at the point it became 1 lane, a car tried to pass me on my right. I slowed down so he wouldn't hit me, but he ran over one of those metal lane dividers. It got caught up in his back right wheel well, and went around a few times. I could see it and hear it make a mess of his fender. Last I saw, he was pulling over to inspect the damage. I banged my knee on the corner of a hotel bed and my husband was laughing his butt off while he was brushing his teeth in the bathroom. As soon as he walked out to the bathroom, he hit his knee in the exact same way and I got to laugh my butt off. Are your butts okay now? More importantly, are they both back on? I saw a guy in a gorgeous sports car, Ferrari I think, honking and yelling at a pedestrian in the crosswalk. Pedestrian had the right of way and was crossing during the signal. Immediately after they passed, the guy guns it and darts around the corner and rear-ends a cop who was in the middle of writing a ticket. There was a truck parked on the street that was just enough to obstruct Ferrari guy's line of sight through the turn. It was glorious. I didn't even see it happen, I just heard the crunch right after he turned the corner. I'll be honest, the vast majority of people I see in sports cars are kind of D-bags. I'm sure there are exceptions, but let's be honest, that kind of money usually has a correlation to a crappy personality. Not instant karma, but I remember in middle school I knew a kid that would go door to door collecting donations for the walkathon, and he'd keep the money for himself. He used the money to buy video games with it. One day he loans his friend his game collection. Said friend moves away with it. This guy at my job could only afford a tuna sandwich for lunch, and someone stole it here and there, and once did so 3 days in a row. He got his revenge by making his sandwich on the third day with really cheap wet cat food. His lunch was left alone after that. I used to be a zookeeper. This B-word was making fun of our llama for looking ugly. The llama was a rescue who had corrective jaw surgery. The B-word pointed and laughed at our llama. The llama spat in her mouth. I gave the llama a treat and told her that she was a good girl. One time in middle school, this guy who was relatively new at our school was making fun of a girl in our class who fell in the hallway in between classes. Coincidentally, this was a girl I had a crush on. He was a little bit of a class clown and was mocking her, making her look stupid and clumsy. Apparently, he misjudged his footing, and while attempting to jokingly ape the way she'd fallen, he fell for real and landed squarely on his back in front of everybody. He broke his arm in the process. Passing by him in the hallway, I saw him just lying there, surrounded by adults and staring up at the ceiling, face completely expressionless. He didn't come back to school. Pretty sure he moved after that. I would have too. This absolute moron that I knew in school was trying to get a mentally handicapped kid to do stuff for a jackass-type video in a very nasty, cruel way behind the gym. I was sitting behind a car smoking green herb in the parking lot. Special kid is not dumb enough to play this game, and this butthole decides to get him to hold the camera. People are heckling and calling out suggestions, nothing interesting happens. Then someone carries out a basketball, puts it on the concrete sidewalk, then hands the jerk an aluminium baseball bat and mimes hitting the basketball, like splitting a log with an axe. Jerk winds up, brings it down, and I hear a blank, and his head is shooting back with blood everywhere. From where I was and how much herb I'd smoked, I thought he smashed his skull. The bat clatters like 20 feet behind him and he goes down backwards. The bat bounced, nailed him in the eyebrow, split it open, and knocked him the frick out. He was okay, but had a scar and a heck of a black eye for a few weeks. And the whole time, the mentally handicapped kid he'd been trying to humiliate on camera is filming and laughing so hard he's fricking crying. Security didn't believe that nobody hit the jerk until he showed them the video. I saw someone tailgating another car on a highway. There was a huge CRTV lying in the road. The tailgatee changes lanes at the last minute and the tailgater slammed full speed into the TV. It was hilarious. That a police car rounded the corner just in time for me and a guy to tell him that a bunch of kids had just thrown a firework at the owner of a nearby store. It was literally moments later and they could see the kids running down the road from where we stopped them. I've got two, can't really decide on which one is best. The first, driving to work during a snowstorm. Pretty much everyone is taking it easy because snow. Some guy in an Infiniti FX35 thinks that he's invincible, so he comes driving down the road, probably 15 miles an hour faster than everyone else. So he goes past me and I don't see him again until the fork in the road. Mr. Superhero went into the turn too fast and slammed into an iron fence at the triangle dividing the two streets. He was fine because he was outside his car, looking at it with a look of confusion. The second story was driving home one night around 10 p.m. I'm stopped at a red light in front of a shopping mall about midway down the block. The east and westbound road is separated by a pedestrian island. Someone pulls up next to me at the light, looks around, and drives through the red light. Suddenly, from the opposite side of the street, red and blue lights, a whoop whoop of a siren, and an NYPD SUV hops the island and pulls the guy over. The police weren't camped out or anything, just waiting at the red light on their side of the street. Right place at the right time. This happened a couple of months back, young driver in a brand new Merc dangerously overtaking me and others on a single lane. Caught up with him at the next set of lights, 2-lane, mine turning, his going straight, both with a car ahead of us. We did the universal wind down your window sign and suggested he cool his driving or he'll get into a crash. He told me to F off. Lights go green, he boots it off the line, smacks into the back of the car in front. Bonnet bent in half, radiator blown, airbags deployed. I got out, checked the other poor innocent driver was unharmed, and gave him my details as a witness. Gave the other driver the old "told you so" and carried on my way. A guy in a Charger was weaving through traffic and passing at high speed in a work zone on the interstate, and I said to the other person in the car, "It'd be nice to see one of these buttholes get busted just once." A minute later, a state trooper swings out from the tree line on an access road and pulls the guy over. Double fines for speeding in a work zone, by the by. My best friend's mum has always been like a second mum to me, at least since my bestie and I were in 4th grade. This year for Easter, she invited me over for dinner with her family, so I decided to get her a quick gift, which included some dog toys for her huskies, some flowers, a thank you card, and a scratch-off ticket. She'd always been so kind to me. She even writes the same sweet, motherly messages on my Facebook timeline as she does for her own daughters. That's probably why I cried with utter joy when the ticket I bought her won her $1,000. It wasn't necessarily instant karma since she'd been good to me for more than 16 years, but she won some money in an instant. Nice to have one of these not just be bloody vengeance, even if, admittedly, those are just a little more satisfying. In elementary school, all the kids went to the bus stop together. As we walked, one of the second graders ran into a lamp post. One of my classmates couldn't stop laughing. We crossed the street and he was still laughing his butt off and didn't look where he was going. You know what's coming. He ran into a lamp post as well and instantly got laughed at. Was at a show jumping event, and a little girl went up to a famous show jumper with her book of famous riders and asked him to sign it. She couldn't find him in the book and asked if he could help her. He responded, "Find it yourself," and walked away. In his final round after the incident, worth $100,000, first jump, the horse stopped and he fell face first onto the floor. Not gonna lie, I was laughing.
The best one was a real frickin' goon at my school. He got up on the roof of a shed to pee on kids as they left the shed. But this dumb bully fell off the roof, resulting in a broken wrist, injured wang, and humiliation. I remember a kid climbing on the roof of a classroom to get conkers to throw down at people walking past. He threw one at someone in the year below who caught it magnificently, then returned it with absolute precision directly into the guy on the roof's left eye. The weird thing was, no one said anything. We all saw it and just accepted that the karma had indeed been dealt. The kid on the roof climbed down and went to the matron. I was walking to the store with a friend when we were 13. We heard someone yelling at us and turned around to see some kid about 50 feet away. He was yelling and calling us every homophobic word you knew at that age. As we started to walk over to confront him, he did a 180 and started running while turning. Well, he spun around and ran face first into a tree and hit it hard enough that he fell to the ground from the impact. We couldn't stop laughing, and hopefully that was enough embarrassment for him to learn a lesson. People who've used a bar's safe word drink to get out of a bad situation, what happened? Had a creeper at a hotel bar who wouldn't leave me alone despite my best efforts to ignore him. I even asked him politely and not so politely to leave me alone. He actually kept trying to touch me and told me that I was going to go to his room with him. He had a strange, angry edge too. So I gave the bartender a help me look and said to him something like, "I need to talk to you about that thing with my tab, remember?" and asked if I could do it when the bar closed, which was like 5 minutes later. He looked at me and said, "Give me a minute," and made a phone call and then said, "So they can help you at the front desk." Meanwhile, Creeper is literally not leaving me alone and is still trying to actually hang on to me and keeps talking. So I start to leave and Creeper is trying to kiss me and pull me close, but I tell him I have business at the front desk and walk up to the desk. There are about 3 employees there, and I said, "The bartender said you could help me with my tab." And one of the employees says, "Oh, I need you to come here with me to fix that." And she says to the guy, "You need to stay here, this is personal business." The employee, a woman, and I start to walk away, and of course the creeper followed us. She actually walked me to a staff elevator and he tried to get on with us. She told him, "Get out of here and leave us alone." As a male hotel employee came up to him just then and the elevator door shut. The employee walked me literally to my room door and stayed until I had it locked on the other side. I've had, and still occasionally do have, guys hit on me, but never anything like this before. I actually wrote a long email to the hotel corporate office and the actual hotel about the bartender and 2 employees, because they helped me in what I would say was above and beyond. The guy really frightened me. I've been as brand loyal as possible to that hotel chain ever since.
Another time, I was in a bar in the States. I'd been a regular here for a little bit, and I knew the bar staff. A new guy comes in and starts hitting on the bartender. At first, she just seems to play along with it, so I ignore it. It's not my business. Time goes by and he starts getting more and more aggressive on hints at her. He wants her number, but she's giving him excuses like, "Oh, my phone is broke right now," and eventually she says, "Look, enough, no." At this point, I'm paying attention, and he says she's just shy and she knows she would like it. She gets upset and she asks him to leave. I tell him he should leave. He ignores me and is still trying to smooth things over with her. Manager comes over, who is also a woman, and tells him he needs to leave. I tell him he needs to leave now. By this point, there was a group of 3 construction guys who had gotten up and come over to the bar, and he was told he needs to pay and leave right now, or we, the guys, will take care of him ourselves. At this point, he decides to pay and leave. The manager gave us all a round of free drinks. The guy came in again the next day when the owner was there. The owner called the police and trespassed him. Frick yes, construction guys. This is a kind of non-violent vigilante justice I think we can all get behind, right? Not a safe word per se, but my mum and friend went to a bar and a guy mugged her friend outside. She entered with her purse messed up and holding a shoe, and their male friend called over to the owner. He called out something like, "Woman down," and a bunch of men stood and went outside to search for this guy. Turns out a few years prior, a woman there was a victim of the unspeakable act. After that, the owner established a code phrase with the regulars for if a friend gets attacked. The place looks like a dive bar at first glance, but the owner was a serious gentleman and didn't even allow cursing in there. All I can picture is a bunch of drunk barflies pouring out of a bar ready to do battle, like some wacky version of that first scene in Gangs of New York. Dive patrons, assemble! Something opposite happened to me. This strange, much older guy wouldn't stop talking to me. I was in my mid-20s. I was shy, so I tried to act polite toward him, but I was visibly upset. A female bartender came up and asked if this guy was bothering me. I nervously chuckled, "Yeah, kinda," and gave her a look. The bartender laughed and said, "Leave the girl alone," or something similar to him in a joking voice, then walked away. The man said I was rude and walked away, only to come back and bother me a few more times. A couple of days later, a friend who frequents that bar said the bartender told him my story. She says I hurt the older guy's feelings and the bartender didn't appreciate it because he's kinda kooky, but irregular and means no harm. I don't go to that bar anymore. Had a bar call 911 once after they bounced a guy who was creeping out a woman. He stood outside the bar and flat out said he was waiting for her until she came out, which he did. He started following her and told people that they were together. I literally had to stand with this moron while this poor girl and her friends got into the car, and the absolute D-bag tried to stand really close so he could get the address. I told the driver her address, but gave the address of the jail, which most taxis know, and he seemed to get the hint. Guy tried to complain that we had unlawfully detained him just so he couldn't get the girl's number and address. I mean, yeah, that's basically what we did. Move along. I've actually been used to escape by a random before. Was at a local bar with a bunch of friends, and out of nowhere, a girl walks over, sits on my lap, and between teeth, clenched smile just said, "Pretend to know me." I laughed and loudly said, "Hey you, where did you wander off to?" Thankfully, my friends picked up on it because inside of 10 seconds, a few of my female friends were chatting with her and standing between her and the guy she'd fled. I asked her after what about me made her know I was a safe person to turn to, and she said, "Because you're here with a bunch of women. Total honesty. I thought you were gay." Haha. I'm a bouncer in a nightclub. No drink safe words, but we actively keep an eye out for situations which don't look above the radar. If a girl's leaving with a guy and she looks too intoxicated to stand, I'll take her aside and ask what his name is and how she knows him. If she seems to have had something slipped in her drink, I'll call the police. If she's scared or needs help getting away from a bad situation, I'll call her a cab and walk her to it. I'll also say to the bloke that I need to see some ID because his entry stamp isn't the right one. As soon as I see it, I'll take a photo, pass it on to the police, and ban him for life from our club. We've built up a reputation as the safest nightclub in our area, which draws both crowds, especially girls. It's massively helped our business being so focused on safety. In 2012, I was at an undressed beach in Toronto. A random 60-year-old man approached me. At the time, I was a shy 18-year-old, and he simply wouldn't leave. He talked on and on about how I could come live with him at his house and be his girlfriend, all the while not letting me get a word in edgewise. To escape this situation, I decided to call the day a loss and leave, even though I'd only just arrived. As I walked back to the ferry, he emerged from the trees and followed me back to the mainland. He was still planning out our lives together and offered to buy us lunch at a local bar chain. Not wanting to lure the scary guy back to my apartment, I agreed in the hopes of stalling and figuring out a plan. We sat down at a table by the door and I said I had to go to the bathroom. And as I passed the bar, I gave the bartender, a 20-something female, the 411 on this creepy guy situation. I asked if there was a back door somewhere I could slip out of and leave without him noticing. She replied that there was one through the kitchen, but it was for staff only and she couldn't help me. I felt so betrayed that another female wouldn't intervene at all and cried a little bit in the bathroom. I was so young, new to the city and genuinely scared. I didn't even have a phone back then, I was so broke. When I got back to the table, the food came. I ate 2 bites and when he called for the check as he waited for the bill, I said, "Well, this was," and ran into the street. But I still took some crazy side treks before getting on the subway. That sounds awful. The bartender definitely should have helped somehow, or at the very least got the manager involved if she couldn't handle it. I had to use it when on a date off Tinder. We met up and he'd already got me a drink, just sitting there, a shot of something clear, and then he said to me that I should do it, then he would take me somewhere better for more fun. I wasn't comfortable, so I excused myself to the bathroom and saw a poster that said to ask for Angela if you're uncomfortable. Went to the bar and asked for Angela, and immediately this guy was playing along saying, "Oh yeah, she's working in the kitchen tonight." And he got me a taxi and walked me to the back door and into the taxi to make sure I got there without any hassle. Never saw the guy again.
Are you saying that when you arrived at the bar, he had already ordered you a drink and it was there waiting for you? Yikes!
I went out on my own one night and was having a few drinks at a local pub. I just moved to the area, so I didn't really know anyone. A guy sat down next to me and was chatting. At first, this was just casual, but he eventually became really tipsy and handsy. Then the guy actually kissed me just out of the blue, and I told him I was not okay with it. He said I was leading him on, which was not the case at all. He got angry and stormed off to the washroom. I was feeling really uncomfortable and unsafe. I didn't know my new neighborhood yet. The bartender saw that I was feeling off right away. He didn't even know me but could tell. He asked if I wanted to be shown out the back door and if they could put me in a cab home so that I could go without the guy following me. They even paid and apologized that I felt unsafe in their bar. I was totally blown away, and I would totally go back there and feel completely taken care of. Heck yes, bar manager. If you can't confront the guy, this is an excellent way to deal with the situation. I think most clients would even be glad at the option without the taxi fare paid for, but that's a great gesture. This is a relatively new thing, but some of us girls have been doing some form of it for a long time. Back when I was a bartender, I noticed a girl stumble into the pool table. She was crying and clearly very intoxicated. I went over to ask if she was okay, and some guy I hadn't seen her with all night jumps up and says, "I'm her boyfriend. I've got her." No, the frick you do not. We got her to calm down and give us her phone to call her roommate so someone safe could take her home. It sucks that it's necessary, but I'll always love my boss from that bar because he threw that creep out, physically. We saw her again, she didn't have a boyfriend or remember that night. Working as a bartender and bouncer for the past couple of years, I usually just try to watch for body language of people that are in the bar. If it looks like someone needs a quick escape, I'll approach and pretend I'm an old friend that hasn't seen them in a while. If they don't actually need help, I can excuse myself by saying they look like a friend. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My university town had the highest number of incidents of attempted unspeakable act for 5 years in a row. The school and community took it very seriously and implemented procedures all over the place. I asked my friend who was a bouncer at my favorite bar and nightclub, what happens when a girl orders the drink? He said it changes from week to week in the ladies' bathroom to confuse men when word gets out. You can use any of the former ones and the bartenders will jump into action. Generally, they find a way to get you away from that person, whether it be a phone call or they need to show you something. Once you're out of eyesight, they whisk you away to the opposite floor of the place. The bar is on the bottom, the club is on the top, and they keep the date occupied until you're gone. If he gets away from his company, they radio that the drink got spilled, and every bouncer abandons their post to try and keep him away from you. They escort you out the back door into a waiting cab. They pay the cabbie to take you home and make sure you're not followed. When you get home, they ask that you flick your front porch lights on and off and call the club to let them know that you're safe. They also save the security cameras from that day in case you have need of it at a later date. I never used their service because my friends were the bouncers and usually intervened before I needed to say anything. My friends did use the service though, and they said it was a relief to be in a bar that took women's safety so seriously, because in other bars in that town you could pay a bartender $20 to spike a drink. I learned the hard way to never accept a glass from someone who had their open palm over the glass. Some people are really sick. Recently happened to me. I met up with an ex after roughly 5 years of not seeing him. He seemed way off when I arrived at the bar. Forgot his wallet, not surprised, so I bought the round of beers but immediately closed the tab because I wasn't expecting to pay for him and didn't want him taking advantage. When I excused myself to the restroom, I was already regretting the evening. I left the restroom and he was standing outside the door. Every alarm in my body went off, but I just acted annoyed and questioned him. He mumbled something and walked over to a pinball machine. Never played it, just looked at it for a solid 10 minutes. Which gave me enough time to call my bartender over and ask, "Girl to girl, this guy's on substances, right?" She agreed and asked me if I felt safe. I obviously didn't, so she let me exit through the back door and even got her bar back to walk me to my car. Not sure if anything would have happened, but I'm really glad she was so cool about it. In conclusion, my ex showed up for drinks, obviously out of his mind, and the bartender helped me escape. I'm a bartender in a small town. Anytime a new woman comes into the bar, I let her know that if she ever feels uncomfortable or needs anything, to ask me to go out for a smoke with her. I've had plenty of people use it to get away from some of the usual creeps, but nothing beats the night a guy asked this girl to go home with him. After she politely refused, he grabbed her and called her the B word. We already had our eye on the situation, and my bouncer immediately came out of nowhere and tased this drunk idiot. I had a creep corner me in a bar once and tried to stroke my thigh. Then another dude I've never met before came up and said, "Hey sis, I've been looking all over for you," and he put his arm around me and walked me out. Thank you so much, stranger. It was pretty obvious that they were not working together. The nice guy walked over from a group of friends, all college-aged, and the creep was in his 50s. And when I said he walked me out, he just walked me to the door of the bar. I once got hugged by a random girl sitting at a bar who whispered in my ear, or actually talked normally, the music was loud, "Pretend to be my boyfriend." I grabbed her on the thigh and yelled, "Honey, I've been looking for you." The guy who had been hitting on her gave me the "sorry, I had no idea it was your girl" look, and then she asked me to dance. She pulled me into the crowd and we danced for like 30 seconds and she gave me a smile and left. Never saw her again, but I felt like a frickin' hero. Very small thing I did, but I felt great. Semi-related, but I was out at the pub on a campus for a show, and had been there previously in the day celebrating our last exam with some friends. Some guy who was sitting at a table next to us and trying to chat us up earlier was still there with his buddies and was drunker and braver, and of course he got me alone when my friend went to the bathroom. He wouldn't stop talking to me and getting in my face and yelling about himself, and when I excused myself to go to the bar, literally was like, "Okay, bye." He followed me to the bar and ordered the same thing as I did and offered to pay, and I said I was good and he didn't stop talking. I must have looked mad as frick because the bartender walked over and went, "Hey, you were here earlier, right? Buddy, give us a second, I need to speak with her about her tab." The guy leaves and the bartender tells me I looked distressed and asked if everything was okay. I told him I was fine, but this guy was in my personal space and not leaving. So he said that if he doesn't stop that, I should come back and order a whiskey lemon, and security would be notified and he would walk me back to my car if I needed it. We ended up moving tables, and I think he got too drunk to stand up and left not too long after that, but I was so relieved to know that the bartender was watching out. I'm not one for confrontation, and it just feels so much safer to be able to duck out with someone having my back. I'm going to ask at work tomorrow if we could install a safe word drink policy at the bar. That would be such a great idea. Oh, follow-up. I suggested it to one of the managers and a couple of others today, and they like the idea. The next stop is getting our general manager to implement it. Not exactly a safe word drink, but some adult clubs still have an alcohol-free code phrase for the dancers that don't want to get hammered and don't want to refuse drinks. For example, with an extra lime wedge, and the guy still gets charged for a normal drink, so he's none the wiser. Where I live, we once had an epidemic of pickup artists on every corner. There was this one guy who was incredibly persistent and wouldn't take no for an answer. When I told him I had a boyfriend, he wouldn't let me leave and said I had to give him one of my friend's numbers. Thank God a kind girl noticed what was happening and came up to us while saying, "Well, there you are. We've been looking for you. Come on, let's go. The show is going to start." She got me away from him and I was so thankful. To anyone out there, please don't ever do it. It's such repulsive and scary behavior. Well, I knew this topic would be full of gross dudes and my expectations have not really been subverted. Thankful that most of them end with these D-bags getting blown off. I'm a straight guy, and I had a girl rescue me once from an uncomfortable situation. I was at a bar with a couple of buddies, and these two girls were sitting in front of us, that none of us were even interested in, let alone said anything to them at all. They started trying to chat us all up. When asked what we do for a living, I said I was a garbage man and had kids, in the hope that that alone would be enough for them to move on. But unfortunately, no. So I must have been looking around the bar with the eyes that said, "Get me the frick out of here." And this nice girl I'd never met came by and did the "Hey you, I haven't seen you in forever" thing, and gave me a great big hug, which of course I thanked her for. She saw I was super uncomfortable and needed rescuing, so she saved me. I repaid her kindness with drinks, and we met up later for a movie. Since then, I've been more aware of the signs, and would help a stranger if ever the need presented itself. A guy I was with was super adamant about me keeping up with him, slamming his drinks. He would drag me to the bar and order for me, then egg me on to drink faster. I did not want to be drunk with him. He ordered me a vodka soda and I maintained that slightly pained look on my face, hoping to catch the bartender's attention. When he looked my way, I widened my eyes a little and subtly shook my head no. I watched him as he poured my drink by faking the vodka pour and just filling me with what I presume was soda water. Not normally my drink of choice, so I wasn't sure what it was. Kinda looked like stale Sprite, and he garnished it with a lime and everything. Said, "Cheers," when he handed us our drinks. This continued for a while until Drunky McSmashypants wanted to leave. Bartender said to me, "Oh, you'd asked about seeing Megan, right? Yeah, she's in the back. Go ahead while he closes out." I sort of hovered by the restrooms, which were tucked away, watching the bartender BS the dude for a while, and he eventually left, looking all annoyed. When the coast was clear, I came out and said my thank yous, and he said, "Anytime, happens more than we care to admit." So I thought it was pretty cool that the bartenders were aware enough to pick up on the little signs and help a sister out. I guess during their conversation, he basically convinced the dude that I didn't seem into it, and he thought he saw me leave already. The drunk dude was drunk, so I guess he bought it without further intervention necessary. Not a bar, but a grocery store I used to work for had a safe word. The store did a lot of sponsorship, charities, community outreach, and other things, and in particular was a partner with a women's advocacy group. There was a product in the store that was never ever put on sale, so that if any employee was asked what the sale price on that item was, then one employee would distract the guy with customer service while she was shown the product she was looking for, i.e. brought to the store office by way of the back room. The bar never had a safe word, but we had a lot of reasons to get to action. Rough crowd, really. A couple came in, the woman had smeared makeup and both just looked super angry. The girl whispered to the bartender that he was hitting her outside. We called the police and had her come to the back as the guy just sat there dumbfounded. Cops came and put him in cuffs and he's denying it all. The manager came in to get the video for the side camera. She played it and the cops came back out and released him and cuffed her. She had tried to stab him outside and broke his windshield. Great night, and he drank free the rest of the night. I've experienced the bartender hero before. Out with a friend in DC. A guy comes up and stands way too close, introduces himself and shakes my hand way too hard and way too long. I had to actually pull my hand away and he kept the grip. I politely told him I was visiting a friend I hadn't seen in a while and wanted to spend my time with her and turned my back. He kept standing there, trying to talk to me. I again, but more firmly, told him I wasn't interested. He stayed. He orders another drink and the bartender serves him, all the way at the other end of the bar. Actually showed him his drink and said it will be over there and walked it as far away as he could. I thought that was brilliant. He got a very, very good tip from us. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.